How's it going? You know, it's always...
Can everybody take their seats, please?
Hey, how are you, Vince?
Good evening, town meeting members. Welcome to the February 2026 special town meeting. Welcome back to McCall, which served as the home of Winchester Town Meeting from 1957 to 1972. We picked tonight's venue for the romance of it in leading up to Valentine's Day. We thought we'd have a nice moody venue for tonight's town meeting. Just kidding. The high school is being used for something else, so I appreciate everybody's patience and flexibility for finding their way to McCall tonight. I ask for your understanding. I am abbreviating some of our opening traditions for this special town meeting, as there is a public hearing at 8 o'clock scheduled for this room, and we'd like to be able to turn over the room in time for that. As we wait for the clerk to verify our quorum, we will begin, as we normally do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight we are joined by 4 exemplary young leaders in our community, the captains of the 2026 Middlesex League champion Winchester High School football team. Which completed an undefeated regular season with a victory over Woburn on Thanksgiving Day. Please join us in welcoming the captains, Gianni DiPrimio, Michael Ficcarello, Brian Harrison, and Lucas Scattino.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. Time for the pledge. I pledge allegiance. Oh, please rise. Sorry about that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've been informed by the town clerk that we have a quorum. Winchester Town Meeting will now be in order. I just want to take a quick moment to recognize and welcome our new town manager, Christopher Sr. This special town meeting is to provide town meeting members with the thought process and analysis behind the select board's intent to place a ballot question on an operational and capital override on the spring 2026 ballot. A special town meeting is not required under the Massachusetts general laws, but it has been the tradition in Winchester for the select board to call one in order to provide town meeting with insight into the report process and receive feedback. The determination of whether or not an override question will appear on the ballot lies solely with the select board. Through this meeting, the select board is interested in the members' perspectives on the reports and on the amount of the override. Because town meeting action is not required, the only motion before this special town meeting and the only substantive motion that will be entertained is to receive, discuss, and file the reports of the Select Board, School Committee, the Capital Planning Committee, and the Finance Committee. Public hearing is planned to follow the single article special town meeting, wherein which the public will have an opportunity to comment on the merits of the proposed override ballot question to be determined by the Select Board. The present special town meeting article is intended only to provide town meeting an opportunity to vote, to receive, discuss, and file the report of the town officials, boards, and committees on the subject of the override ballot question. Second, given the time constraints of this special town meeting, as has been the custom in Winchester, questions will be limited to 3 minutes each. As we begin, Matt, go to the next one. As we begin all town meetings with 7 preliminary motions that appear on your motion books and on the screen in front of you, in the interest of brevity, the chair asks unanimous consent to dispense with the reading of the preliminary motions. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. All those in favor of the preliminary motions as printed in the motion book say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motions are adopted. That brings us to Article 1. On behalf of the Select Board, Chair Michelle Pryor.
Got a little bob and weave up here, apparently. Is this thing on? Nice. Yes? Good enough? Sorta? Okay. So, as the moderator said, we have quite a bit to go through. We have a pretty robust agenda. You're going to hear from me this evening. Now it's on. Paris, Stephanie, Roger McPeak, Chris Sr., Tim Matthews, and FinCom Chair. So let's get into it. So some of you have seen this from our TMMA presentations. What's Winchester known for? Academic excellence, safety, health, and well-being of our residents, protecting our natural and built environment, robust stewardship of our taxpayer resources. We have a lot to be proud of. We have reconstructed in the last 20-odd years 6 of the 7 schools in town. We're almost done with our multi-decade flood mitigation program. We've done several green initiatives, and we've maintained our AAA bond rating. The state of the town was convened after Springtown meeting because while we're currently sitting at 18% operating reserves, we face a structural deficit of $5 million and growing going into the next fiscal year. Good Lord. So our goal of having the state of the town convene and produce a product was to create a plan to get us on proactively stable financial footing for the next several years. The last override was in 2019. It's been 7, almost 8 years since we've asked voters to approve an override. The State of the Town group had members from Select Board, School Committee, Planning Board, FinCom, 7 at-large members, many of whom were town meeting members, school staff, and municipal staff. Over 20 people met a whole lot of Fridays from June until January. We looked at operating needs, we looked at capital needs, we looked at areas to increase revenue beyond the property tax levy. Look at costs and efficiencies, tax fairness, and fiscal stewardship. Our report is available on the town's website. It's a short 24 pages. We also have 14 backup reports that show you the data we analyzed to come up with the analysis that we did. At the end of that process, in considering a range of growth, revenue scenarios, and expense scenarios, we believe there's a need for a general operating override to fund both operating and capital. The entirety of the Select Board agrees that now, heading into FY 2027, is the appropriate time to pursue an override. To delay is to let those deficits continue to grow. It's important to note that if we don't put an override question on the ballot this March, it doesn't mean your taxes won't go up. They go up every year. The table behind me shows for an average assessed house of $1.46 million, where your current tax bill is $16,486, if we had no override, by 2030, you'd experience a 13.5% increase, or annually 3.2%. So hey, if it's Prop 2.5, why is it 3.2%? We have the CPA, we have borrowing, debt exclusions on a variety of projects, and Prop 2.5. So then you'll see tax sort of base bill in 2026 growing by 2030 in $2.5 million increments. The increase goes, a 13.5% increase goes to 821, so 8%, 10%, 12% growth. It's just important to know that not having an override doesn't mean the tax bill you pay today is the tax bill you'll pay in a few years. And the last piece I'm going to do before I hand it off to Paris, after all that work, a majority of the Select Board, so 3/5, indicated support for the below range of figures. A lower bound of operating at $10 million, an upper bound at $13 million, on capital $2.5 million to $3.5 million, and those two numbers don't add to $15 million, but that's where the range is. That $12.5 to $15 million is what informed the previous page's analysis. The Select Board will meet on Thursday the 12th, 7 p.m. in our Select Board room. We will vote a final number. It has to be to the town clerk's office by Saturday to get onto the ballot for March 21st. So now I'm going to turn over to Paris, and we're going to keep plowing through this deck.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Michelle. So Michelle gave the overview and where the Select Board ultimately landed in terms of a range. What I'm going to do with Stephanie Minyarji from our school committee is to walk through the level services, meaning the budget that we need to preserve services as they are on both the municipal side and the school side. And then we're also going to talk about the strategic additions that the school committee and the Select Board prioritized independently and then ultimately together as part of the State of the Town process. So, as Michelle said, the current situation, we have an operating deficit of about $5 million. and that grows every year. And you'd say, why does that grow? I think people are familiar with this, but overall our revenue grows at approximately 3%, Prop 2.5 plus new growth. In addition to our locally raised resources, we also have some state aid and local receipts beyond our property tax. Those also grow at a sub 3% range, so they're 2 to 2.5%. We also have about $1 million of federal money. We're expecting at best for that to be flat. That all flows to WPS. Against growth in revenue, that's about 3%, we have growth in expenses that you see behind me. So municipal departments grow at 3% on a level services budget, and that's primarily DPW, fire, and police, as well as then all the other town hall departments. The problem is that our health insurance grows at a much higher rate. So our health insurance has been growing at anywhere from the mid to high teens in recent years. Our indication for this year is around 15%. In recent years, it's been even higher than that. So our health insurance, which covers both municipal and school employees, grows at a much faster clip. In addition to that, we spend about 3 to 5%. We see about 3 to 5% growth in our pension and retiree health care allocations. So these are also, significant budget items. They add up to about $7 million that we have to put into our OPEB trust fund and our pension trust fund in order to pay for future benefits for our retirees. And in addition to those budgets, we have our schools budget. And Stephanie's going to speak more about this in a few minutes, but our schools budget has historically grown north of 5%, close to 5.5%. And the reason for that is, in addition to cost of living adjustments, teachers receive what are called steps and columns moves, so for additional training or for additional seniority. And the net result is that our education budget does grow faster than the municipal budget and also faster than our revenue, in addition to health and pension. So the first thing that we did, as we've talked about in the briefings, when the select board convened the state of the town process, we wanted to make sure this was really a comprehensive plan. So there's 6 different work streams that are on the screen that Michelle presented. And the first thing that we really looked at, beyond sort of our needs, is what can we do about these trends? And so the select board has identified several areas for additional revenue growth. Interest income is one, and then there's a variety of ways that we can drive that. Revising our fee and fine schedules, taking a look at how we can use solar power. We have 4 arrays today on a variety of additional town facilities to drive either revenue growth or cost reduction. And altogether, we decided to factor in about $800,000 of additional incremental revenue. Some of which we have identified, some of which we have ideas of where we can get it, and the select board has committed itself to going out and finding those. In addition to that incremental revenue, so this is on top of that $800,000 recurring revenue, the select board has taken a view that we can increase our turnback figure. So every year the town turns back roughly $1.7 million today into our budget. And what that is effectively, first, it's pretty much all on the municipal side, and it's basically positions that we don't fill. And so when people ask, well, did we look at cuts? The way we approached it from the municipal perspective is to increase the level of turnbacks from about $1.7 million to about $2.1 million. So that represents an additional $400,000 of savings, via cuts that we think can be achieved. Alongside that, we continue to look at our other long-term growing expenses. Health insurance is a hard one to manage, but there are certain plan design changes the select board generally considers. We're going to keep approaching those. Our retiree health insurance is another one where we can review benefit levels. It has to be done very carefully. And then, again, Winchester Public Schools, our largest budget item. The school committee, in partnership with the select board, has agreed to grow their budget at 4.25% per year. The first year, FY27, would be 5% and 4% thereafter. That's a full 1.25 below their long-term trend growth. And I'll leave it to Stephanie to explain how that came about and what that sort of looks like for the schools department. So that's where we start the picture. A variety of things the select board and the school committee have done to drive incremental revenue and to drive cost reductions. And so the next thing, and that's the level services piece. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the strategic additions on the municipal side, and then I'll hand it over and I'll be back at the end of this section. So, as all of you know, we have run a pretty lean government in a variety of ways. We enjoy regular turnbacks of over 1% of our budget. And so we had, with our town manager, our previous town manager, gone out and talked to all the municipal departments about areas they thought they needed a little bit of incremental investment. And that's what you see behind me. Altogether, our departments came back with about $1.6 million of requests. They had a list that was kind of a wish list that was above that. They had core needs that they thought they really needed of $1.6 million. The select board, working at that point with our interim town manager, had a vetting process where we went out and talked to all of our departments, did follow-up research, had a number of meetings on that at the select board where we walked through them, and ultimately decided to include about $800,000, about half of what our department said were our core needs in our plan going forward for strategic additions. And you see some of them behind me. I'll just highlight the first three. So our Council on Aging, for example, which operates out of the Jenks Center, being able to find resources for them so that they can provide a lease to the Jenks Center and potentially unlock a bit of an improvement to that facility, as well as additional transportation. Our rec department is a program that has tripled in size over the last several years. It continues to have extremely high demand for its offerings. Finding a way to augment their subsidy so they're able to provide more adult education. It's something we have found a lot of demand from through our age-friendly survey, age-friendly Winchester survey, and just generally the feedback the recreation department is getting. And another one is around some of the stewardship of our natural spaces, including our waterways, as well as the creation of a tree program to make sure that the canopy that we have in town, which adds to our charm and the property values of our town, remains resilient and robust. So just a few examples of what's in here. On the municipal side, each departmental ad is quite small, but altogether they add up to roughly $800,000. Okay. So that's the level services piece. Select Board did. Strategic additions on municipal. I'm going to hand it to Stephanie next, who will go through the WPS level services and strategic additions.
Thank you. As part of the State of the Town effort, the school committee is providing a recommendation to help the Select Board determine the amount of a tax override. The school committee just reviewed the superintendent's 2027 budget that outlines level services plus the strategic additions that I will be presenting. However, this falls under the assumption of a successful override. And in the event an override should fail, the school committee has put together a series of budget scenarios with free cash assumptions as suggested by the Budget Summit, and my colleague Dr. Timothy Matthews will be presenting that later. So to build our ask from State of the Town, we will start with level services. The Select Board, as Select Person Bayani just told us, informed the school committee that it will model schools' level services at 3.5 to 4%, well below the average of 5.5%. And so a considerable amount of blood, sweat, and tears went into making this slide possible when WPS level services came in around 6.8% for FY27. However, going through a combination of internal cost savings and operational efficiencies, enrollment and related adjustments and balancing classroom sizes and shared building resources, we were able to bring it down to 5% for FY27, 1.27 million below. With a commitment to 4% thereafter for an average of 4.25%. The hope is that the work here will provide room for investment in the strategic additions that I'll be showing shortly. However, first, we wouldn't be a good school committee without assigning homework. So before I get into that, it's important to note this is a summary of months of deliberation and surveys and feedback from parent associations, the State of the Town Committee, consultant reports, analyzing MCAS data and DIBELS, performance metrics, to name a few. So since Mr. Moderator wouldn't be very happy if I turned this into a 3-hour meeting, can we please just go to these, watch the video of the schools and select joint meeting, and required reading, of course, is the State of the Town report, but also the 148-page schools deep dive. But don't worry, there's a Cliff Notes version. Otherwise, you can call me and we can do a walkthrough. So the strategic additions, here we go. Looking at this data, the school committee prioritized the following as our ask for strategic additions. Some of these items are the new literacy and math curriculum. The literacy pilot is nearing completion, and we are on track for a full rollout in September 2026, and math shortly to follow. Both require ongoing investments in professional development and curriculum materials. Tiered supports. Now, this is something that is common in our peer districts, but no one in Winchester knows what tiered supports are. This is essentially the services that we're building out here are going to help our COVID kids catch up and also provide targeted intervention for children that do not qualify for an IEP. Small group instruction of 3 to 4 kids is a more scalable, appropriate, and targeted level of intervention. So even with the introduction of just 2.5 math interventionists last spring, we're already seeing some migration off IEPs and into these services that are now available. Expanded courses and electives. Now, one of the top findings among students, parents, and teachers from our Spring 24 survey was a call for more advanced courses and elective options. With a room full of elected officials, I'm sure we can all agree that the kids need AP Poli-Sci. So now, during the budget summit, we were asked to take a hard look at our requests and separate out one-time costs and be disciplined about what truly belongs in the operating budget. And we did exactly that. Moving the literacy curriculum rollout, math pilot, and any startup costs into separate town meeting articles, what remains are strategic investments that extend through FY30. So to provide some perspective, in FY30, our COVID kindergartners will be in high school. Time is a cruel teacher. The total request amounts to roughly $1,000 per student for the entire time horizon. This is to help our kids catch up and to provide the right supports at the right time and to deliver the level of academic excellence we expect for every Winchester student. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Final slide I'll present, and then I'll hand it over to Roger from our Capital Planning Committee. So we've walked through what level services is from a municipal perspective, school's perspective, that obviously was higher. We talked about the initiatives we've taken on both sides from revenue and cost. We talked about strategic additions. So the key question is, how does that factor into the sizing of an overall override? And so what you see here is how the Select Board has been wrestling with that question. So that's the first bullet. It's one of the most important things we have to take a look at. Second important thing we have to look at is how long do we want this plan to last? So as Michelle said, the last override was expected to last 3 to 4 years. It lasted 7 through a combination of things that we've talked about in the briefings. Our view was that we also want this plan to last 3 or 4 years. We think we can get it to 3 years and then some, and then from there the Select Board would have to take action and continue to partner with the school committee to find that additional 6 or 9 months to get from, call it 3 years and a half or 3 years and a quarter to 4 years. And the way we measure that, and that's the third bullet here, is our operating reserves, which are effectively the closest thing the town has to a bottom line. And so what you see in the table is that FY29 is year 3, FY30 is year 4. What you see from a strategic additions perspective is we have to stay above 10% from an operating reserve standpoint. We can get to 3 years with a $10 million operating override. I want to emphasize that's operating. We haven't talked about capital yet. Getting to year 4 is harder. With $13 million, we can get to year 4. And so that's why the Select Board selected that range, or majority of the Select Board selected that range of saying, we know we can get to year 3 with 10, we know we can get to year 4 with 13. How do we figure out how far we're going to get and what additional revenue we're going to commit ourselves to over and above that $800,000 plus $400,000, that $1.2 million, to get us the rest of the way. All right, so that's operating. I'll hand it to Roger for capital next.
I have the easiest story of everybody. My time's been cut, so I'm going to cut to the chase. We started out with the 5-year capital plan. We looked at the requirements of some 160-ish individual projects going out 5 years. That came to us needing $86 million in the next 5 years to cover our capital needs. We then took a look at the funds coming into the stabilization funds, backed out the amount of money that we have for debt service on that. That gave us roughly $32 million, leaving us with a deficit and a yawning gap of $54 million between being able to fund the capital needs that we have and the money that is currently going into the fund. That's it in a nutshell, really. That's why we need help. Also affecting this and hurting us is the fact that, as you all probably know, the funds grow at 2.5% a year, compounded over the last 6 years. They've gone up 16%. The next number is the CPI number. That's relevant to you and I, but not really to a town. The next number is, it's called the Municipal Cost Index, and it's an attempt to look at what's going on in cities and towns across the nation and explain the cost increases that they're seeing. Towns pay a lot of salaries. We use a lot of energy. We plow roads and pave roads and maintain buildings. So that has gone up by 32% relative to the funds that have gone up by 16%. The last thing that I want to show you is the Building Cost Index. We maintain a lot of buildings, and you can see where COVID hit and we had the supply chain shocks. It shot up dramatically, and it's sticky. It went up by 40%. I would say, based on what we've seen in terms of project costs, that we're somewhere between that 32 and that 40% increase, and we've only gone up in funds by 16%. So what did the State of Town Working Group do? We took all of this number and we went back and we said, if you want to implement the full 5-year program, that's going to be the $53.9 million figure that we're going to have to make up, and that would represent $3.6 million. We realize that's a big ask. So we wanted to put along a series of packages that could get us to there, that would, if you can think of it as jumping off points. And we started out with Town Hall. That's aligned with what the Capital Planning Committee is focused on right now, getting the Town Hall back up, getting the HVAC system fixed, doing renovations inside that. And then we added in the schools packages. And so you see this series of options that we've presented to the Select Board and that they can choose on how they want to proceed. Now, this is a 5-year plan. If they elect to do 3 years or 4 years, there's certainly millions of dollars in year 4 and 5 that are accounted for in this already. But that's a choice that they have to make. I will say that this is aligned with capital planning, although this was not voted by the Capital Planning Committee. The one thing that the Capital Planning Committee did say was that they would feel that if we couldn't at least get to the level of D, that this process would have been a failure for us. So that's where we stand. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. So I will take the next section before handing off to Chris, Senior, our new town manager, and Tim Matthews, who will talk about what happens if we don't have an override. So we've talked about, from an operating perspective, where we think we need to be, and from a capital perspective, the view of where we need to be. And so the key question that is on the other side of that is, what is the impact of that from a tax perspective? So I will go through a brief table in a moment, but just wanted folks to understand the key assumptions. There's a lot more backup in the appendix and in other places that we've posted online. But the key assumptions are as follows. First, as I said, we're considering the majority of the Select Board and override between 12.5 and 15. We modeled these tax impacts with a 70% phase-in in year 1 and a 30% phase-in in year 2. So the way an override works is, if we add, say, $12.5 million to the levy, we don't pull the entire thing in the first year. And the part that is, we pull what we need to balance the budget, whatever this body, town meeting, chooses to appropriate for our needs. We then pull enough levy in order to meet those needs. Whatever we do not pull is not taxed. So residents do not pay the full levy on day 1. It's phased in over time. To pull 70% in year 1 and 30, and then the remainder in year 2, is a pretty conservative assumption, meaning it is more aggressive than our historical experience. In 2019, it took 3 years to phase in the full levy, but we want to show a more conservative view of the tax impact, because we don't want residents to have the view that we said it would go in slowly and it actually went in quickly. So more conservative read there of 70 versus, and then 30. And the other thing that you'll see in one of the rows we're going to show is there are pieces of the Lynch School, the Morocco Culvert, the South Reservoir Dam, and then the CPA, 3 of which were voted on by taxpayers, as South Reservoir Dam just by this body and the Select Board, that are approved but not fully in the levy yet. There's pieces that are still being added to the levy. And we've also modeled an assumption around a Morocco reconstruction using Lynch as our proxy. Lynch is a bigger school. We think that's a conservative assumption. But if Morocco, based on what EFPBC thinks, is voted on in the fall or winter of 2028, that could hit the tax levy in FY29 and FY30. So we've modeled a piece of what we think could hit based on the historical experience of Lynch, which is a $71 million exclusion. Okay. Some technical assumptions as well. Average home, as Michelle said, is $1.45 million. So what you see on this page, and again, we have lots of ways to look at this, but this is the best summary that we found to explain it in a single page, is what is the annual impact from the override itself. And so you take the top row, the annual impact in the first year is a little bit under $1,100, an additional $500 in the second year, and then it levels off after that. Beyond that, you'd say, why isn't it just zero if you implemented the whole thing? Because Prop 2.5 is now compounding on a slightly higher number. The second row, which is the cumulative impact, is just the 1094 in the first year and then adding the 496 to it. So you see the full impact of what the override would be. On full implementation, it would be just under $1,600 for $12.5 million. That's the 1590. And from that point forward, it would just grow at the ordinary Prop 2.5 level. At 15 million, similarly, you see it would be 1312. And then upon full implementation, again, shown here by the end of the second year, it would be at $1,900 and then growing with Prop 2.5. As Michelle said at the beginning, with no override, taxes still increase 3.2% annually on a compound annual growth. That is those exclusions that we just mentioned, the Morocco vote, as well as the regular Prop 2.5 that goes up 2.5% a year. So the incremental annual growth from a $12.5 million override is 5.4, and a $15 million override is to 5.8. And you see the total increase over a 5-year period in the middle. Okay. All this will be online. We'll also, depending on where the select board lands on Thursday, likely have a calculator that people can just plug in their home value times the number that we choose, and then the phase-in level. Right. In addition to what the tax impact would be, the select board, one of our work streams, it's been a very important one for the better part of 8 months, has been how do we defray the impact of an override on certain vulnerable populations. So we know we have about a fifth of town that is cost burdened. And so the select board, working with the Council on Aging and the Veterans Agent, has been bringing a variety of tax relief measures forward. We increased the senior circuit breaker by about 17%. We raised the senior tax deferral limits from $60,000 to $72,000 and $109,000 per couple. That's the state max. All of you voted on that at fall town meeting. We're working with our school committee to bring our senior volunteer program back up to its high water mark. At one point, it had several dozen participants, north of 50. It's fallen. We want to bring that back, and we've also doubled the veterans exemption under the HERO Act. Again, all of you voted on that in the fall town meeting. In addition to the senior tax reliefs and veteran tax relief programs that people can avail themselves of, the select board has also discussed and had a conceptual level of support from all 5 of us for what's called a residential tax exemption. We have a version of this today in our Community Preservation Act where the first $100,000 of a home is not taxed. So a home that's worth, for example, $700,000, 6/7 of it is taxed. A home that's worth, $3 million, 29/30, so it's 97% of it is taxed. It's a bit of a progressive measure that we can implement. And we've discussed that at a 5 to 10% level. So if you watch the TMMA briefings, you'll get a lot more detail on this. But the short of it is that this is not something that affects the overall levy. We collect the same amount of taxes either way. It doesn't affect the commercial or industrial rates. But what it does is it could allow us to shield the impact of an override from people who have homes and protect a subset of our population valued below a certain level. And so when we've talked about a 5 to 10% exemption, that would really protect homes worth $800,000 or less or $1 million or less. For the average home, it's neutral. And then there's a slight addition to the homes that are above the average. So that's a piece that the select board controls. We vote on it every November at our classification hearing, and it's something that we've talked about that we are conceptually supportive of to pair with an override to defray some of the costs for that. Okay, I will hand it to our new town manager, Chris Senior, and Tim Matthews to talk about this is what happens if we do have an override, what happens if we don't.
Good evening, everybody. Of all the topics I would have chosen to present at town meeting in my first appearance before you, discussing potential cuts to the operating budget did not make the list. That said, here I am, and that's the topic. Town managers work with what they're given, so here we are. That Winchester's expenses are rising faster than revenue is no surprise. Benefit costs, inflation impact expenses for materials and equipment, high utility costs, and particularly new contracts to maintain a competitive salary structure and retain top quality staff are all driving the operating budgets. for everybody. It's not just Winchester, it's everybody. As you can see, the numbers back here, the board has said, hey, we have to limit the amount of free cash we use, and quite frankly, our bond rating agencies would say the same. When you do that and you come down, there's still a gap with the parameters that we're working with. Doesn't mean we're not working hard. There's going to be a presentation at the end of the month to the select board on a new building and zoning permit fee schedule. That could raise another $100,000 from basic, and it keeps us competitive with our neighbors. We're going to continue to do those things, and we'll continue to work hard to bring our benefit costs down. That said, it's an ongoing effort. It doesn't stop, but these gaps are growing. Answer? Okay, sorry. There we go. Sam, I'm still learning how to use the equipment here even. So what happens if the gaps remain and continue to grow? Well, there's got to be no strategic additions. The town just can't add services. We'd have to freeze hiring. We'd have to really look hard at everything that we're doing. The average employee, and again, these are the numbers up behind me, that doesn't represent any one person. It's an average. Stacy ran the numbers. That said, most of the expense on the town side of operations, and even on the school side, are people. That's the biggest asset that we have. And in order to bring down expenses, we're going to have to look at headcount. Now, exactly what that means, I'm not prepared to have that conversation tonight. That would be a big conversation with the select board and the community over the next couple of months. That said, to bring costs down would mean taking a look at literally everything we do. It's what how often the buildings are open, what kind of services are provided, how often we do maintenance and things of that sort. And the biggest town departments are not here because I'm pointing at them for any other reason than those are the sizes of the staff. There are so many departments that have 3 or 4 or 5 people. You can't just eliminate a whole department. We have to still assess and collect and provide health services, a whole host of things we do. And for its size, Winchester is a very lean staff. I've actually had the great opportunity to meet folks. I was up at Public Works the other day. I thanked them for all their incredible work they were doing with the storms. I've been up at the police and fire stations, got a tour of West Side. The one place I haven't yet been is recreation. That's coming soon. Dr. Hackett and I met the other day for several hours. Lots of great stuff, but the town is lean. It runs lean. And there's unfortunately, there would have to be a lot of hard looks. And again, it wouldn't be my decision. It would be a big community conversation. So that is the municipal side, and I will be happy to turn over to Tim in the schools.
Good evening, everyone. Like the new town manager, the superintendent and I drew straws to see who would get to talk about this part of the school's budget, and I obviously got the shorter straw, so here we are. In comparison to what Stephanie talked about earlier, the no override scenario would land us $840,000 below the level services budget that was presented earlier in this deck. And what that means is listed in the bullet points on the right-hand side of the slide. And I think the most important thing that everyone needs to hear is if we were forced to go to this scenario in the event of a failed override, we would be at risk of not being in compliance with our contractual obligations to our different bargaining units. And we would also see that certain services would not be able to be offered to students, including ones that are legally mandated. We would experience reductions across all classifications of staff of an incremental 12 to 15 FTEs, and that's above and beyond the reductions that are able to be taken because of declining enrollment numbers. We would potentially see, especially in our secondary areas, increased class sizes, but beyond the maximum guideline and potentially even for our secondary students classes with 30 or more students in them. Families would would experience increased transportation fees and reduced services, and we would potentially have to look at either eliminating certain co-curricular or extracurricular activities, as well as increasing the fees and making them fully self-funded. I think it goes without saying that we would then have no strategic additions. As mentioned earlier on, we would not be able to fully move along with our literacy curriculum overhaul and implementation. We would not be able to continue implementing implementing our math intervention specialists at the elementary level and other tiered support strengthening. We would not be able to roll out course expansions in the middle and high schools, and we would be likely in a situation where we'd have to delay the feasibility study for the Morocco School. For those that haven't tuned in prior to this, the MSBA has selected us for the Morocco School to be rebuilt, and one of the steps in proving our seriousness about that is to engage in and fund a feasibility study for that, and we would not be able to move forward necessarily with that. And so I just want to emphasize before I move on that this is an additional cut beyond what you've seen in the level services budget that Stephanie presented. And so it ends up being $3.2 million per year below the superintendent's budget that we voted at our meeting last week. And last thing I just want to mention, the Select Board asked us to consider different uses of free cash, and the $3 million investment of free cash scenario, which would be $1.4 million below level services, is not a viable solution for us. And so that's not even shown here. This would anticipate $4 million in free cash usage. Since we've just talked a lot about doom and gloom, I want to just look ahead, hopefully, to Springtown meeting and end this part of the presentation on what I hope is a high note. Both our partners on Select Board as well as the school committee are super grateful to town meeting members for continually being engaged with Winchester and supporting the families and residents of this town. Our job here is to provide a really clear and well thought out plan to town meeting members and voters, and we hope that's what you've seen tonight. It is the product of literally months of work and weeks after weeks of meetings. And so with your help, we hope we'll be back at Springtown meeting discussing in a very hopeful and positive way all of the different ways in which we are going to be able to move our town and schools forward. Thank you so much for your time, and I think at this time we're turning it over to Derek Ross from the Finance Committee.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Derek Ross. I'm the Finance Chair and also the anchorman of this presentation. As I mentioned in the fall, the sky hasn't fallen on our financial situation. So you may ask kind of why we're discussing overrides. So let me share some of the good and some of the bad, and I think kind of summarizes many of the things that were discussed tonight. So from a good standpoint, as I mentioned before, our leverage is not highly leveraged compared to some of our peer towns around us. Our free cash at the moment is at or above prior year's numbers. We bridged last year's deficit with the existing free cash, and we're pretty much back a year later in almost the same place. You've asked of stronger collaboration between FinCom, the Select Board, the schools, municipal, and I really feel over the last several months, especially with the state of town efforts.
Mr. Moderator, I rise with a point of order, I think. We're not sure if the Finance Chair has slides that go with what he's saying or not.
So I can't see anything up here.
Sorry.
There, you're good. That's
Yeah. I was making it so you had to listen instead of read, but yeah. And then lastly, we're on a path to overperform, as I mentioned, versus the prior budget. We've done a good job working collaborating together to, things have come up during the course of the year, but we've been able to mitigate them as they come. So kind of the bad, mainly because of our lack of commercial base, we have a perpetual ongoing deficit, as we've talked about. Revenues, as mentioned, grow about 3%, which are a lot lower than our main cost drivers, be it schools or municipals, which grow at a higher percent. And so we basically have a perpetual deficit every year. Also, as mentioned, we're seeing historic healthcare costs. The majority of our costs, a significant part of them, are people costs. And so the health care costs have really caused our expenses to spike over the past years, as well as the CPI rate, which has also affected both, as shown in the capital presentation. Pretty much everything we buy is a lot more expensive year on year. And then lastly, as we mentioned, the aging capital throughout town needs constant assessment and investments in. So an override is needed, as I mentioned, because although, like last year, maybe we could absorb a $4 million deficit, it's not something that's sustainably viable. Our free cash is one of our most important assets in town, and everyone, as we all know, makes sure that we have a lot of things that pop up during the course of the year that need to be addressed. So FinCom, we're not addressing in terms of how much an override should be. Really, that's dependent upon the services that are meant for it. But the kind of takeaway is, although we might have cash at the moment, there's definite needs to as mentioned throughout the presentations, to support the services that we've all voted for, that we needed as a baseline for the town. So with that, I think I'm the last speaker, and I think we'll be doing questions next.
Thank you. 10 minutes after promise, but we'll go with that. Before we open discussion, I would like to take a moment to recognize the extraordinary time and effort put into the State of the Town Committee, most notably by the chairs, Ms. Pryor and Mr. Bagnani. Can everybody give them a round of applause? So now we'll open it up to town meeting members first, starting with Ms. Pryor.
Can I come up front?
Yes, sir.
Do I leave this open? Leave it open.
It's not me. You don't want to get mine. All right, so quickly, could we have a smaller override? I believe we can. When we meant as a select board, I said $8 million or $1 million. I don't make things up. So what's behind that? Paris mentioned, Chris Senior mentioned, additional revenue. Building permit fees are expected to generate $100,000, that one department. There could be $200,000 to $300,000 or more in ongoing annual revenue. Health insurance costs, as Derek and Paris mentioned, are very high. They're at 14%. If they dropped to 11% in the next 4 to 5 years, that's another $1.5 million in savings. In FY28, we will have paid off our $190 million pension obligation. That deserves a round of applause for everybody. We're going to pay it off 2 years early. In my opinion, we got to try to find some ways to give some tax relief and stabilize some of our other funds. We have to continue to fund the pension. We can't just go from $7 million to zero. We're going to start to fund OPEB, which is retiree health insurance. But we could take some of that savings and put it to stabilization funds, like the Health Insurance Stabilization Fund to protect against future inflation, like the General Stabilization Fund to shore up our reserves, like the Building Stabilization Fund to help us with our capital. Property tax growth from new developments at just Washington and Swanton Street probably will come online in calendar year 28 or 29. That's $220,000 to $250,000. 33 Mount Vernon, Waterfield, North Main Street, those revenue figures aren't yet known. So the other piece, and why we should look at something perhaps smaller, our residents are cost burdened. This is data from NCA, pantry visits 2024 to 2025. Lots of red, I'll explain what's there. In 2024, of the 12 months of the year, 6 months did visits and appointments exceed 80. Last year, 11 of 12 months had 80 appointments, and the 1 month that didn't have 80 appointments had 79. In 2024, we only have data on children served for the 7 months. The average was 79 children. Last year, 96. In months with 250 or more clients, in 2024, 1 month. Last year, 7 months. Data from other sources. Census data, SNAP, which is food stamp data, free and reduced lunch data, the sources are there. And the last piece, which is just our own department, the Recreation Department gives scholarships for preschool and after-school care. In 2023, we gave out 8 scholarships. In 2025, 51. In 2023, about $5,000 in assistance amounts. Last year, $24,000. Our Neighbors Help Our Neighbors Fund is depleted. NCOW scholarships are depleted. The revenue enterprise is funding financial aid for 51 children in our town. Those are working parents that need preschool care and after-school care.
Ms. Perry, you've reached the end of your time.
This is my last slide. I would ask the Select Board, and I will on Thursday, to consider override affordability for all of our residents. We should look at an override amount between $8 and $10 million. We can revisit our financial position in 3 or 4 years. We're likely to have new revenue, we're likely to have savings, and we'll know better where health insurance is and where inflation pressures are. That's my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Further on the question, Mr. Betancourt.
No, I think these are the ones, right? These are mine. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, town meeting. Just a few comments here. First of all, again, thank you for everyone that participated in the State of the Town. I think my question is kind of going back, what was the assignment here? And the goal was to evaluate the town's finances relative to our structural deficit, to determine whether existing revenue growth will support future departmental budget needs and program improvements like literacy and math in the schools, to look at revenue generation to see if we are leaving revenue on the table, and we certainly are, and determine when we will need an operating override, and to determine the size of the override and make sure it'll be right-sized for Winchester based on our stakeholder feedback. Do we need an override? Based on all objective criteria, we will need an operating override 1 year from this spring. If we waited a year, our operating reserves would still be at the very top of our policy range this year by supplementing with free cash. In 2019, we were near the bottom of our operating reserve policy range, had substantial deficits, and were near the bottom for per pupil spending and teacher compensation compared to our peer communities, while enrollment was projected to increase to over 5,100 students. Now we are at the top of our peer communities in per pupil spending and teacher compensation, with enrollment down by over 700 students. What's up with that? So, as Michelle discussed, the affordability issues at the local level are very real. We have 25% of our community is housing cost burdened. That's from our housing production plan. It's no longer affordable for young families to move to Winchester. Where we see enrollment decline is at the elementary level. And this is what it looks like to create an economically gated community. A larger override than we need will make that problem worse. We will serve less kids but spend more money doing it. This is the opposite of inclusion. Another question, didn't ARPA funding extend the 2019 override? And the answer is no. Over $7 million in ARPA funding was all spent on capital projects, which really helped us chisel away at our capital queue. But what about the capital crisis? Over the past decade, we have spent more on capital than any of our other comparable communities. Independent of ARPA, we have spent over $50 million on projects in the capital queue. We've also spent nearly $200 million in debt exclusions during that time. We will likely spend another $50 million on rebuilding Morocco over the next couple of years. Chapter 110 allows us to tax residents for water and sewer infrastructure beyond the stabilization funds for projects like the South Reservoir Dam. Clearing the capital queue is not the assignment for any municipality in Massachusetts or the country. It is to be strategic, and it's to pick off those projects that are priorities for us, and certainly be strategic with things like the CPA and some of these other funds that we have available. The other question I hear a lot is, isn't $12 million in 2026 the same as $8 million in 2019? And the answer is no. In fact, since Proposition 2.5 was enacted in 1982, overrides has systematically supplemented budgets, but the range is still the same. Most are less than $10 million. In 2019, we were in much worse shape than we are now because of deferred expenses. That is why that override lasted 8 years instead of the 3 to 4 years being projected.
Mr. Betancourt, you reached the end of your time.
Can I have one more minute, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Focus on revenue analysis will help extend any override past 2030. At least 2 housing projects will come online in 28 and 29 and supplement the operating budget by more than $500,000 every year. School enrollment reductions will right-size the classrooms. Override or not, we will lay off 15 to 20 teachers and staff. That is a reality of our decreased enrollment in our schools.
Thank you. I think there's somebody at that mic, but I can't see who it is, so please state your name and precinct?
It's
Jeff.
One more second, finish.
One more second.
Thank you. So I asked you, let's not supersize the override. $8 million for operating and $2 million for capital will sustain us through the end of the decade and allow us to add everything we need for the schools. Whether we pass a $1 million or $100 million override, we'll be reducing staff and teachers in the school. These are planned reductions by the schools, not driven by structural deficits. It will enable us to maintain a AAA bond rating, fully fund school needs, maintain classroom sizes, maintain our high per pupil spending, and top of the market teacher compensation. $2 million will also provide breathing room for capital, allow us to borrow for large projects without a large debt exclusion. Funding our critical needs is about meeting the needs of the community, and it is not an arms race. So thank you again, and look forward to discussing the override more.
Okay, further on the question?
Jeff Calabrese, Precinct 6. Good to see you, Philip.
Can't see.
One comment and then a few questions. So a $15 million override will be the largest override in the history of Massachusetts. A $12.5 million override would be the second largest override in the history here. So what we're talking about is substantial. So first question through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Select Board. For the model assumptions that were used for what we presented here, are there written agreements for those growth targets and a memorandum of understanding with the relevant parties?
It's up to you guys. Ms. Pryor, on behalf of the Select Board.
The answer is no.
Mr. Benyani, you want to do it together?
Go ahead, Paris.
Thank you, Jeff, for the question. There's not a memorandum of understanding. It's not a document that we've generally used between town boards and committees. We, do have a variety of documents, including the state of the town report itself.
Is my time running now or no?
It's paused.
Okay, sorry.
Including the state of the town report itself, which Michelle talked about here, where that 5444 is published, signed by 3 members of the school committee, including their chair and vice chair, and it's also in all of the documents that are presented before this body.
Okay. In terms of schools, last year the schools had budgeted but unfilled positions of about $600,000 going into the FY26 budgeting process. So will the schools commit to reverting unfunded positions, given there's a pretty significant expansion of headcount included in this override?
On behalf of the school department, Superintendent Hackett.
Hey, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, to the town meeting. I'm not sure. I would need to see your number. I don't necessarily agree that we had $600,000 worth of unbudgeted positions.
Or no, they were budgeted. This was the document we got from Andrew. So budgeted but not filled.
But not all year long, not filled. So we had partially filled positions. We had ESP positions that we had to add to the budget that mid-year for program or individual need. But we tried to fill every single one of our positions.
So just to clarify, will the schools commit if a position's not filled?
I'm
but
not in a
budgeted?
position to say that. I'm superintendent of schools. That would have to go through the committee.
Sure.
All right, that's the time.
Can I just get one more minute?
Not a question, though.
Just a point to make. We talk about free cash, but nobody actually said the number today. We have about $22 million in free cash, which is more than we had in November of 2024 before we went into a $4.5 million deficit. So there's no urgency here for this type of override at these numbers at all, period. Nobody will get fired if these numbers aren't passed. Thank you.
Further on the question, Mr. Brady.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to speak for less than 3 minutes. So I was reading a lot about outcome of the Patriots game. Disappointed, probably like a lot of people, but I definitely encourage you to check out one of the Boston Globe articles. Quotes a professor at my second favorite university in Cambridge, and he says, what leaders outside of football need to understand is that you as a leader need to step up and be willing to take bold action in the face of uncertainty. So I appreciate the members of our select board that seem interested in taking bold action, and I hope that other members of our town as well are interested in taking bold action, because we have a chance to do significant things for our town, for our children, for our seniors, for our veterans, and if we don't step up and be bold, then that's not going to happen, and we're going to be in the same place where we are now, in just a few short years. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question, Mr. Beers.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Josh Beers, Precinct 7. And thank you to everyone on the State of the Town Report Committee for doing this not easy work, but important work for our town. My question is around comparability with similar communities. What will we look like in terms of our tax levy compared with, let's say, our neighboring towns and similar towns? Just, you say we're going to price ourselves out of people moving to our town. How do we compare with the competition?
It's a great question. Thanks, Josh.
On behalf of the State of the Town Committee, Power Spagnani.
Thank you. A great question, Josh. So FY26, our mill rate, you can see above, it's $11.08, which is the amount of tax per $1,000 of assessed value for a home. In the $12.5 to $15 million range indicated by a majority of the Select Board, we would be at 11.8 to 12. So it would put us between Belmont and Lexington. Now, other communities will have moves, right? Lexington's new high school is not included in their 12.3. That would increase that number. Arlington is proposing a override that they have said they're actually voting on it Thursday night as well. That is not going to be anything under than $14.9 million. So, those numbers would move up. Other towns may move down if they don't have any tax exclusions or overrides and they have compound growth in their property values. They may move down, so we can't speak definitively about other towns, but that's where we are today and where we would be with the two override figures once fully implemented in FY28.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question, Ms. Musto. Please state your name and address.
Caitlin Musto, Precinct 4. I just wanted to state that I appreciate the effort to advance an override proposal. I'm concerned that an $8 to $10 million increase simply does not match the scale of the structural budget gap that we are currently facing. Based on current projections, that amount would likely cover only 1 to 2 years of needs before the town is right back in the same position. It carries significant financial risk because it assumes optimistic revenue growth and flat expenses, neither of which reflect recent experience with rising special education costs, contractual obligations, and inflation. Passing a smaller override may feel more politically comfortable, but it would almost certainly require additional cuts to services in the near term and another override attempt shortly thereafter. The approach creates instability. I urge us to look at our neighboring towns like Melrose and Stoneham, who did not pass these overrides when they were on the ballot the first time, and what happened. And I have a question for the chair of the State of the Town Committee. Can you express how long you think a $10 million or $8 million override would actually last? Thank you.
Mr. Bagnani.
Yes, thank you, Caitlin. So we can look at the model to give you an answer. It's unclear when others have talked about 8 or 10, the share that would be operating versus the share that would capital. But let's just assume. Do you want to do 8 and 2? How should I? 9 and 1. Okay. So 9 and 1. So this is probably the relevant perspective. So our view is a $10 million operating override would get us 3 years and not to 4, right? So it'd get us 3 years and a little bit. So 10 years, I think, proportionally, just doing it in my head, would get you just to 3. And then from there, we would need to find that whole 4th year. So that's $1 million differential would get us, several months less. Michelle talked about the incremental revenue. So from fines and fees, $200,000 is already baked in to that $800,000 I talked about, plus the $400,000 of turnbacks. So the revenue we'd have to find is above and beyond that $200,000 of fines and fees. In terms of capital, it's not a question of timing for capital, as Roger went through. It's a question of which scope you would tackle. So $1 million override you see here would be, slightly above package A, which would be the town hall base scope. You can see what $2 million would be, which would be somewhat close to package C. So that's what those types of numbers would do for the town.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's 2 more town meeting members in line. We're going to hear their questions, and then we're going to vote to accept the report, and then we'll have the public hearing after that. So further on the question, Ms. Calabi.
Thank you. Priscilla Calabi, Precinct 1. I was also State of the Town. I was one of the at-large members and participated in all those meetings. It was a lot of work. I feel that we are doing a very black and white approach here, that the sky is not falling. It is not a worst case scenario, but we're projecting as though it were a worst case scenario. And taking money from residents, our money, against, which is current money that we're using in the present, against a future very bleak hypothetical. How about if we do something in between and take less money from the residents now for the current issues and maybe revisit this in 3 years when we've seen some of those hypotheticals, some of the hypothetical income, and when we've seen what the world looks like, so that we're not getting resident money tied up towards a hypothetical future. Thank you.
Thank you. Final town meeting member on the question, I think that's Ms. Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Carol Savage, Precinct 5. So it's my understanding, I'm, first of all, very impressed with the work of this committee. It's been a long time since we've had this thorough of analysis. But just to clarify, it's my understanding that based on the work of the committee, the 13 million or 12.5 million number addresses the level services in the schools plus the strategic additions. So that's a question. Is that what the committee is saying? And then as far as sort of these other questions about hypothetical things that might come in higher or might come in lower than the model and the plan is forecasting, did the committee opine on, should there be windfalls, what would the committee recommend the town do? Stick to the plan? Would further increase reserves? Does the committee have an opinion on that? And can you confirm what number addresses sort of the base assumptions in the plan?
On behalf of the State of the Town Committee?
So Michelle and I will take those in tandem. Thank you for your question, Carol. So to go back, sorry, I should take Roger's animations out. To go back to the view on where we are from an operating capital perspective, I think the majority's view was that on the lower bound, that 10 and 2.5, what that would address, as you saw in the previous slide, I don't want to go back to it, is the 10 million would get us 3 years and a bit, and then we would do all of the additional growth and find the other things. Now, again, we have the 800,000 of incremental revenue in there. We have the 400,000 of turnbacks in there. We have schools coming in at 5% in there, which they've talked about. But at that 10 million, if we do all those things, we could get to 3 years and a bit, and then we would have to go out and find that last year. And Michelle could talk about sort of the concept of windfall. At 2.5 million, that's what Roger talked about. I think it's package D, is it? E, yeah. So you can see it on that table. But it's the package that allows us to get what the capital planning committee's view would be at least, I think their word was anything below that they would view as a failure. So that's what the bottom end of this range is, the 10 plus 2.5. The 3.5 would be the full program. 3 is obviously a number, you could be anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5. And then the upper bound, that 13, it would get us, in our view, to 4 years on a strategic additions basis without any material risk of that. If there's incremental revenue, and I'll ask Michelle into this as well, I just want to emphasize, when you pass an override, it's authority. It's this body's job to determine what appropriations actually are, and then the town pulls the levy we actually need. So if less levy is needed, less of the override is actually pulled down, it lasts longer, and less of that tax does hit residents if that revenue materializes or cost savings materialize.
Okay, thank you. I will save my opinions for the public hearing.
Let me just do one more. I agree with everything that Para said. The last thing is State of the Town did not, so there's the levy capacity, then there might be windfall, right? There could be, just some fall out of the sky movie production comes along and we have non-recurring miscellaneous revenue. The State of the Town Committee did not discuss where to invest those. Should it go into a stabilization fund? Should it go into reserve? Should it go into capital? State of the Town did not consider it. Select Board certainly could, but we did not debate that.
Thank you. Ms. Menardi, you will be the first person to be called on in the public hearing, if that's okay, because I already called.
So I should sit down?
I'm sorry?
Would you like me to sit down?
Yes. Thank you. Respectfully. Yeah, we're going to adjourn. So first, I'm going to, the chair will hear a motion to call the vote. Do you have a second? Seconded that the reports of the town officers, boards, committees, including the finance committee, be received, discussed, and filed. All those in favor? Aye. All right. And now the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the February 2026 special town meeting. A second? All those in favor? Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. What? So can all the members of the public who are not town meeting members just raise their hands so we have a sense of who's here for that? All right, and now we're going to hand the meeting over to Michelle Pryor, Chair of the Select Board.
So the only person in line was Stephanie. Carol will come back.
I'm sorry, I know, first. Thank you. Hey.
So we'll give people a minute to leave or take a different seat closer to the front. We'll start in about 4 minutes. People that are here for the public hearing, and this is not a question for the town meeting members, I suppose. Does anyone wish to hear from Paris and myself to go through an abbreviated version of the slides that we did at 7 o'clock? If so, okay, we'll go through it. This will take about 15 minutes. So town meeting members, feel free to take a quick nap. But, yep, there's one hand of yes. So take a quick nap. We'll go back to questions, but we're going to just dive in. So these are some abbreviated slides on the state of the town. This is our quick agenda. So for anyone who wasn't following our meetings, we convened the state of the town after spring town meeting, so in the May-June timeframe. The town is currently at 18% of our reserves. Our target is to stay between 6 and 10% currently. We hope to move that target up. We wanted to have the town come together with a comprehensive financial plan to put us on solid financial footing in the future. And the last override was in 2019. We've not asked voters to pass an override in 7 years. The State of the Town group had membership of a variety of elected and appointed boards. It had 7 at-large members, and it had town and school and municipal staff. The State of the Town report is on the town's website. You can find it there. You can QR code. If you really want to dive deep, there are 14 backup reports that we used as reference or that we created as models. That's available for anyone to consume. If we don't, so we believe, the State of the Town believes, after looking at revenue, growth, and expense analyses, we believe an override is needed. We have a structural deficit. The sky is not falling, but the ceiling is being lowered, and the entire Select Board agrees that now would be the right time to ask voters to support us going into FY27. We want to make sure the public knows and anybody else that not having an override doesn't mean your taxes don't grow. They do. They grow every year. They grow at about 3.2%. They grow because of Prop 2.5, new growth, borrowing, and the CPA. If we do a 10 million, 12.5, and 15 million override, there's just $2.5 million increments. A current tax bill of a house assessed at 1.4 million will grow to 20,032, 20,364, or 20,695. An operating override is not time limited. That is a permanent raise to the base of the taxes. And what that is on an annual basis is 5.0 to 5.8%. The view of our Finance Committee, so if you weren't here and I stole Derek's slides, these are their words, but we think they're important to repeat. The good, the town is not highly leveraged. We have some debt that is retiring. We have some school projects that are being paid off. We're not borrowing and leaving ourselves really cash poor. Our free cash is $21 million right now. It's at or above prior years. There's good financial stability. Our comptroller, town manager, and all town departments do a very good job of managing our finances. And we're on a path to overperform against prior year budgets in terms of current year revenue. We're actually going to probably realize more revenue this year than we did last year. But the not so good, as I mentioned, we have a perpetual ongoing deficit. We raised revenue about 3%, right? 3.2%-ish. Health insurance is going to be 14%, 14.4% year over year. Our contracts and salaries may grow by more than 3.1%, 3.2%. And we still need to maintain our capital assets. So we believe an override is necessary to address that deficit, and we believe it's necessary now. The Select Board, a majority of, indicated support for a range of $12.5 to $15 million broken out between operating needs and capital needs. We will vote on Thursday evening. Our meeting is called for 7 o'clock in the Select Board room. We need to have a final figure for the ballot, and that question needs to get to the town clerk by Saturday. So Paris, I'll go this one. You want to come up? So we talked about the structural deficit, revenue growing by 2.5%. We do have some additional revenue beyond the levy. State aid, Chapter 70, roads and sidewalks, Chapter 90, federal aid, about $1 million. Expenses traditionally on the municipal department, so that's police, fire, DPW, town hall staff. They grow at about 3%. Health insurance the last 2 years has been close to 15%. Our pension obligation and our retiree health insurance, which is OPEB, grow at about 3 to 5%, but we will pay off our pension in FY28. And schools grow faster than those 3 to 5% ranges, mainly around 5.5% due to a variety of reasons, but cost of living adjustments, steps and columns. So that's where we currently are. And I'm going to, if you're ready, Paris, I'm going to turn it over to you. And don't worry, we really have 72 more slides to get through, I promise.
Thank you, Michelle. So as Michelle just discussed, we have a revenue base that grows at 3%. That's 2.5 proposition 2.5 growth plus growth, which is about 3%. In addition to that, we have costs that grow, above that. So in the Select Board Committee in the State of the Town, one of the pieces that we looked at is what can we do from a revenue perspective. And so we factored in about $800,000 of incremental revenue. That includes $200,000 of additional fine and fee growth. That includes several $100,000 of interest income, as well as some funds from solar power. And the other thing that we've looked at is our new growth assumption, vetting that against the previous 6 years of new growth assumptions, That number has been higher in recent years due to, this probably would surprise you, what the largest new growth has been. It's been the electric cables that have gone in under Cross Street and other places in town, which we actually receive commercial property tax on, and we've taken the assessor's perspective of what new growth can achieve. And altogether, the Select Board took the view that about $800,000 of additional incremental revenue, we at least had a clear pathway to seeing how we could get it, but it will take real action and votes. In addition to that, we increased our turnback assumption by 0.25% to $400,000, representing not filling, likely not filling municipal positions. Most of the turnbacks, as one of the questions asked of the school committee, all of the turnbacks occur on the municipal side. So that's what we looked at. A total incremental of $1.2 million of either cost savings or incremental revenue. From an expense perspective, we have undertaken a variety of moves in the last several years to try to bring our health insurance growth down. Our indication from Maya for this year is about 14.6%, and hopefully there's things that we could do around plan design. So an area, again, the Select Board needs to continue to focus on, as well as OPEB from a retiree health insurance perspective, where the Select Board does control the benefits level. And then finally, Winchester Public Schools, as we talked about in the last conversation, the school committee has agreed to a cap on growth documented in the State of the Town report, signed by 3 of their members, of 4.25% as 5.4 over the next 4 fiscal years. We talked about strategic additions in the last conversation. I won't rehash it in great depth, but about $800,000 of the $1.6 million that our municipal departments viewed as important have been added, principally in the Council on Aging, Recreation, Concom resourcing, as well as the tree program, and then some other smaller pieces. Some of them are one-time. For example, an update to our master plan, which under state law is legally required, would need to be done. WPS level services growth, as Stephanie talked about in the last conversation, has come down from about 5.5%. This year, entering it would have been about 6.8%. You heard from one of the Select Board members about how our enrollment in some of the elementary schools has started to come down. I want to be clear, those savings are banked. They've been banked here by the school committee. That is how they're able to reduce staff by 12 to 16 FTEs. And so we can't double count those savings as it relates to enrollment-related adjustments and those staff reductions. The other thing that I want to give the school committee a great deal of credit for, 3 of the members negotiated very extensively with the Winchester Education Association and brought that contract into a better level of cost containment, particularly as it related to column moves. Finally, the school committee talked about this earlier. What they view as their strategic additions altogether sums to about $3.8 million over a 4-year period. Once you gross that up for fringe benefits, conservatively, we think it's about $4.5 million. That's a sort of a blunt factor of what health insurance costs. So about $1,000 per pupil over the next 4 years. I won't read this, but as people can watch the committee presentation from the school committee. In addition to what are recurring costs, they also have one-time costs for literacy, curriculum, and one-time professional development, similar for math. For Morocco feasibility, the $1.5 to $1.8 million is bonded, so all we have to carry as a one-time expense, it's really over 2 years, is about $125,000 to $150,000 of interest, so about $60,000 1 year and about $60,000 to $75,000 1 year, and a similar number next year. Okay. The Select Board, as we've talked about, took a view that we wanted this to last 3 to 4 years. We talked about revenue, we talked about level services and strategic additions. Where we would be from a burn perspective, we would be with a $10 million override down to about 11.3% reserves in FY 2029, 3 years. Getting to 4 years would be harder, but with a $13 million override, we can get to 4 years. So that's the range that the group thought was most prudent to put before the residents for feedback as we contemplate our vote on Thursday. Capital, I won't beat it to death. As Roger mentioned, we have $86 million of needs that have come in the 5-year CIP, about $32 million of which are funded. That includes debt service rolling off the stabilization funds. That has already been banked in that $32 million. That leaves $54 million unfunded. It is true we have done a lot of capital. That has largely been the flood mitigation program and de novo construction of schools, or ad renos like Winchester High School, or expansions to this building, as well as the delivery of VO and Lynch. What the projects here are about are not de novo constructions via debt exclusions of school buildings. They are critical maintenance and repair projects of our existing facilities. So Lynch failed after about 60 plus years. That is not the estimated useful life of the school. They should last longer than that. So this is about taking care of assets we have, like Town Hall, 150-year-old asset, Ambrose, Lincoln, and McCall. Lincoln, obviously, also a 100-year-old building. McCall, depending on the part of it, various ages. Ambrose, just passing its 20-year anniversary, but having real HVAC issues and roof issues there that we have had since inception that we need to fix. So nothing here is de novo construction. It's all restoration and maintenance of our existing assets in order to allow those to last longer. Capital Planning's committee's view is fund category H, but they've said that at category D, the $2.4 million, they would consider anything below that to be a failure, but D to H was their recommendation to us. We talked about tax impact. I won't belabor the point, but on a $12.5 million override, it ramps up over a 2-year period. It's sort of a conservative implementation of to about $1,600 over 2 years. The $15 million override is about $1,900, and then from that point forward, they would grow at Prop 2.5. Again, these will be implemented at the pace that town meeting spends money and the pace that our revenue comes in. So if revenue comes in faster, we pull less levy. If town meeting spends less money, we pull less levy. So this, or alternatively, if town meeting spends more money, then we pull more levy. So this is subject to appropriation, what we need to balance the books, net of all the other revenue and cost savings that we would generate. With no override, we would have 3.2% annualized growth over 5 years. With 12.5, 5.4%. With $15 million, 5.8%. If an override doesn't pass, you heard our town manager and the vice chair of our school committee go through this. With $3 to $4 million used of free cash, which is the number that FinCom, school committee, and select board agreed on, we would share that between municipal and schools. You'll see the 400 and 840 do not add to 1.5. It's because we left unallocated health insurance out because it would fall roughly in tandem. The $3 million of free cash use would cause us to need to cut about $2.1 million, the 700 and 1.4. Again, not cuts below zero, but cuts below level services. So you can see that in either case, the budgets still grow. It's just that they grow below the level services number. So municipal would grow at 1 to 1.8, schools would grow at 3 to 3.8, and that would be that would require us to have some efficiencies and reductions made. From a municipal perspective, as Christine just discussed, when you think about 400 to 700 below level services, it translates to roughly 7 to 12 FTEs. Where would that come from? That would be a conversation with town meeting, right through spring town meeting, but areas would be, limiting use of town facilities, reducing cleaning, mowing, trimming, other quality of life, obviously trying to protect the life and safety departments as much as possible. The largest departments being 72 in DPW, fire, police after that, and then library. So it could lead to some staffing reductions. It could lead to more overtime, but that would be a continued conversation. And then schools in a no override scenario, I think to quote the vice chair of our school committee said, we are at risk of noncompliance with contractual obligations. We'd have 12 to 15 FTE reductions. That's above the 12 to 16 of efficiencies that were discussed. So 12 to 16 would be the base case due to enrollment changes. We'd have 12 to 15 above that, and then the strategic additions would be things that they would not do. Worth noting also significant reduction to their extracurricular activity as athletics is something they've said their athletics enterprise fund is basically out of money, and it would require an infusion, and so if we didn't have an override, we would not be seeking that infusion. I think they've said that they would just seek to increase the actual athletics fee. Okay, that is all. And from there, we are happy to take public comment from members of the public, as well as any questions. If you could address who you would like to respond, whether it's Michelle, myself, a member of the school committee, or a member of the capital planning committee, that may be helpful.
Yeah, Stephanie and Carol, do you guys want to get in line? Carol, do you want to get at the back of that line? Stephanie, I think we can start with you.
Thanks, Michelle. So my question was, I know I was on the State of the Town Committee, and there were just so many meetings, and I know we went through so many iterations of the model, and I know we did cover this, but please remind me to get the total schools ask for FY27, how much free cash would we have to spend for the total, including the strategic ads?
Yeah, so the total need for our view of what the deficit is this year across municipal and schools is $5.5 million, right? So $5.5 million is to fund level services, and then your strategic ads for this year are the 2.3, right?
Correct. So
that would be 7.8. And then what of the one time you'd need, let's say you needed literacy, you'd be at 8.7, if I did that math right in my head.
So 8.7 million out of free cash just for the schools.
No, that would be level services on municipal and strategic additions on the schools.
Okay. All right. And that and it's assuming the 5% level services for schools plus strategic additions. Thank you.
I'll go this side, then I'll go that side. So, sure, that'd be great. You can go next, and then I'll call on you. So we'll just alternate lines.
Okay. This is falling. Okay. I don't know why. Okay, sorry. I know this person. Yeah, this seems broken, but I'll just go like this. Okay. Hi, Laura Malone, and you want an address too, is that what you said? I live at 27 Mount Pleasant Street. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for all your work on this. It's obviously a lot went into this, I'm sure. But I'm just here to advocate for the passage of a robust override that would go on the March 21st ballot. I think our kids deserve the best that we can give them. I grew up in Winchester. I moved back here recently, a couple years ago, because of the schools, so it would be extremely disappointing to have my children be growing up in a town where we're not giving them everything that they deserve, especially if we're not even giving them, again, just level funding, but then also the literacy package that's been discussed. There was that survey that had been sent out. I think a lot of great information came out of that. They deserve the implementation of the things that the town clearly needs. I think there's also deficits with math. I don't see how any of that is going to be addressed if we don't put an override on the ballot that allows those things to be addressed sufficiently. So thank you.
Thank you. Go to this side.
Hi, Brian Rowan, town meeting member, Precinct 7. I had a question, just given the presentations earlier, it looks like there's not unanimous support among the select board at what level the override should be at. I know a couple of different figures were thrown out. Other towns, Stoneham and Melrose, have recently done tiers, presenting the residents with different levels of overrides to vote on each. I was curious, right, a low, medium, high scenario, I was curious if the Winchester Select Board would consider such an option to give the residents some choice in the matter.
So that question came up in one of our briefings. Select Board will discuss on Thursday. I think our general preference is to agree on a number that we can all agree on. So
I just have one.
That's our preference. But we will discuss on Thursday.
Why would that be the preference of the town?
What's that?
Any reason for that being the preference?
It's generally been the practice of the Select Board to agree on a number and put that one question on the ballot.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Hi, Nora Cooney. I live at 10 Oneida Road, and thank you all. I know this is a tremendous amount of work, and you're all volunteers, and we are a very leanly staffed town, so this is just an incredible amount of information and time, and we really appreciate it. I'm a transplant. I'm from Michigan. My husband is Somerville and Lexington roots, and one thing that struck us when we moved here was how many people we met that had one member of the couple being from Winchester. It just speaks so amazing of this town and the community, and we've loved joining. And I think we have a responsibility to maintain that and to appropriately fund our town. And now, as a mom of young kids, I have a fourth second and kindergarten student. I obviously am very focused on the schools, but I also love our DPW and the amazing job they do on Oneida Road, and I love our firefighters, and I don't want, at the expense of the rest of the town schools, we have to also fund the town. But I cannot stress enough how very real our needs of our schools are. These are not frills. These are not would be nice. The literacy program that they're trying to do, my brother's district in Michigan, that's not a district that's known for its schools, adopted it 3 years ago. We are talking about having basic standards in our schools that are not being met. And I need to make that clear. And so, with due respect, Ms. Fryer, when you talk about the most vulnerable members of our community and what they need, if we do not have proper Tier 2 supports, if we do not have proper curriculum in our schools, those families that are the most vulnerable are the ones that are being hurt, because they can't go to a private school. They can't afford thousands of dollars of tutoring, which is what I had to spend for my second grader when she was taught the 3 queuing method and was behind in reading. She now is caught up after a lot of work, but some families can't afford that. So these things that the schools are asking for are not would-be nice frills. We are trying to have the very basics now and have them be updated. So we need to fund our schools, but we also cannot let the rest of the town suffer while doing that. So I urge you very strongly to please ask for a robust override and let the town vote on it. Give the town the chance to decide and use the tools at your disposal to alleviate the burden from those that it would be a burden for, which I fully support doing. I would be happy to pay more than my fair share to make sure our town stays the great town that it is. Arlington passed $7 million 2 years ago and are now 2 years back asking for 15. I tell you what, I'm going to be pretty pissed if I'm paying more in taxes and everything is still not getting any services. If you're going to ask people, ask for what you actually need and ask the people and they'll tell you if they want to vote for it. Please don't undersell it now and not give us that chance.
Mr. Nixon?
Hi, Chris Nixon, Precinct 1 on Forest Street. Michelle Paris, thank you, all of you and the board. Thank you to Frank and the school committee and Derek and FinCom and others for all the work that you've done in the presentation tonight. Having been a part of the last override and focused a lot on public messaging around it and trying to manage not just communication but miscommunication, I have a request. I'm actually going to implore the select board to do something before you next meet. There was real confusion in the last override. Folks conflated tax bill and tax rate. I think there was a slide that Para showed a few minutes ago that showed the tax rate in Winchester compared to some of our peer communities. That's a really helpful data point. There's no doubt about it. But if you Google decision 01890, you'll find the website is still up from the last override. And there is a page on that website called The Cost of Yes. And we developed that because the Finance Committee, the Select Board, and the School Committee realized there was confusion in our community, and maybe some were deliberately conflating the two. Prior to the last override, our tax rate was among the lowest of our peer communities. There was only one community with a lower tax rate. With the override, we were middle of the pack. There were maybe 7 communities with a higher tax rate, 9 with a lower. But our tax bill, average tax bill, went up considerably. There were only 5 communities with a higher average tax bill. Now you can argue that made it harder to get to yes, but it was really important for us to be so transparent about that, and we were successful. So I think this is a very helpful slide. I would love to see the same slide developed that compares the projected average tax bill to our peer communities, and it's going to look a little different, and it might make it hard, but I think it'll be a really essential tool for the select board. My memory, I wonder if Mr. Betancourt has the same memory, but I think that slide came up and was key in the select board's decision that night years ago when it really came down to what was the value of the override going to be. So I would appreciate it if you're able to pull that up. I think it will really help you in the messaging at whatever value you ultimately arrive at. And thanks again for all the hard work.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi, good evening. I'm Cheryl Timko at 8 Black Horse Terrace, and I'm here to speak in strong support of an override from the perspective of a parent of 3 boys. When we talk about budgets and overrides, it's easy to forget that behind these numbers are our children. Children learning to read, master math, building confidence, and developing the foundational skills that they need to succeed. Our current school budget is falling short for far too many students. Alarmingly, Winchester schools have no standard literacy or math curriculum in place. This lack of consistency from classroom to classroom and grade to grade makes it hard for students to build skills in a logical, cumulative way and places an unnecessary burden on our teachers, some of whom are sourcing materials on their own and teaching curriculum without proper training support. We also lack adequate Tier 2 intervention support, the targeted help that can catch kids before they fall too far behind. Without this support, small learning gaps become big ones, and in the long run, more costs to our schools. By comparison, our peer districts have already recognized these needs. They have adopted consistent, evidence-based curriculum and have formal Tier 2 supports in place. These are not nice-to-haves. They are foundational elements of any high-quality school system. It's about the basics, about meeting state standards, keeping up with schools around the country. It's about having curriculum, early intervention, and giving our teachers the materials and training that they need to help every child learn foundational literacy and math skills. I experienced these shortfalls in our schools firsthand as a parent of a fourth grader who has struggled to learn to read. We are fortunate enough to afford tutoring, but I think often about families who can't afford that extra support, which makes this about equity too. Those children deserve the same chance to succeed simply by walking into a Winchester classroom. The school committee was careful and restrained in its budget request, focusing on these absolute essentials. They heard feedback from us parents, from teachers, from independent education consultants, and they have put thought and care into their request. And now they need our help to fix these issues. And so with that, I want to ask the committee, how supersized is a $12 to $15 million override? How is it compared to that 2019 override? Thank you.
You go.
Yep. Thank you, Cheryl, for the question. So this slide is something that's come up, I think, in virtually all of our briefings. It was a question that one of the select board members asked me to put together. The 2019 override is on the left. They came to this body, to the special town meeting in February of 2019, with a range, as we are tonight, of $10 to $12 million. 8 of operating or 10 of operating. Capital was going to be 2 either way. CSF and BSF, they actually had a split, but it was 2 either way. If you take the 2 indices that Roger spoke about when he talked about construction costs, you take the consumer price index, which is the standard inflation metric we all know, or the municipal cost index, which is obviously more attuned to municipal governments. You get the numbers on the right. The bottom of that range would be 12.8 to 13 in terms of that's a total override, and then from the top of the range, the select board presented that night with I see sitting right behind you, the chair of the select board at the time, would be about 15.5. The select board in 2019 ultimately chose the lower end of the range, which was the 10 million. So that would be between 12.8 and 13 million today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just so you know, if I'm looking at my watch, I'm doing a timer. We're going to try to keep it, and everybody has been, but 3 to 4 minutes. So if someone goes on and makes a speech, I might call time like the moderator normally would. So just want to make that clear. Go ahead, Jerry.
Jerry Sheehan, town meeting member, precinct 3. One request, it'd be very helpful if we get the overall slides that were shown tonight on the website as soon as possible. A second request, maybe this is not possible, but both Michelle and Mike Betancourt presented some very interesting slides as well, which if they could be posted, I think that might be helpful.
Fine with that.
And I'm going to make one observation. With respect to what Michelle and Mike, I actually have a question, which I came up here to ask. But with respect to what Michelle and Mike mentioned, I don't think they're saying that we can't do what we want to do in the town with respect to our strategic additions. I think what they're saying is there's a way to get to those strategic additions without necessarily having an override as large as might be considered. And I say that as a member of the Finance Committee, having looked at both revenue and expenses. My actual question is get more down into the weeds, and it deals with the strategic additions, and it's addressed both to Paras and to Stephanie. So Paras on the municipal side, Stephanie on the schools. And I'm still trying to get the details in my own mind clear, and I think it would be helpful to the taxpayers as well as, to the taxpayers, to have a little bit more definition with respect to the costs on these strategic additions. So, Paras, I know you did provide in a earlier iteration or an earlier document the 35 strategic additions that we were talking about for the municipal side of the budget. And those, as you indicated in the presentation, are running around 800,000. But if you look out 3 years, those come to, so fiscal 27, it's 800,000. If you look at fiscal 28 and fiscal 29, that rises to about 1.4 million if my numbers are correct. And I think it would be helpful for folks to be able to see specifically what the costs are for each of those 35 strategic additions. On the school side, Stephanie, looking at, there were 2 slides that were very helpful. One was the slide that showed 4 years from fiscal 27 through fiscal 30. And what I'm trying to get clear in my mind is which of those costs are 1-year costs or 2-year costs, but then disappear. They don't carry on into future years. And then the other issue is, or the other question is, for each of those bullets under each of those years, what's the dollar cost next to the bullet? So, for example, I think in fiscal 27 there was $2.3 million in additional cost, and there were 8 bullets. I think it would be helpful for us to know for each of those 8 bullets what the actual number is next to it. So thanks to both of you. I don't expect an answer now, but if that is information that we could get up on a public website as soon as possible, I think that would be helpful.
I haven't received those.
If you, sure.
Yeah. So we did take a look at our ads, and we've shifted some of them from the operating budget, which, can I click over? Am I going, oh, no. No.
Several pages before that.
Why isn't?
But that breakdown is something I asked for a couple weeks ago.
Here we go.
So
dollars next to each of those, right? I think Jerry's ask is, Jerry, the ask is put $1 next to the first bullet, put $1 next to the second bullet.
So under those priorities under fiscal 27, the total comes to 2.3.
Yeah.
I would like to know what those, and I think others would like to know what the numbers are. And then also, which of those are one-time expenses?
Yeah. So we removed one-time expenses out of here, and we put them in the next slide. This one. So the one-times were removed and moved here. So they are curriculum, costs, materials, professional development, any licensing required for literacy, math in FY29, and then math, a curriculum rollout for FY30. So those were removed from the longer ask.
And Stephanie, excuse me, on the one-time expenses, so are those going into the override, or are we going to look at free cash to cover those, or to bond them, I see in one case?
Yeah, they're built into the model that Select has been building. So we've given them these figures, but they're not going to enter the operating budget. We're going to bring them forward as a separate town meeting article, similar to what we did for literacy this past spring.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, but to answer your question and your question, so we, as part of that 148-page homework assignment that everyone I know is going to go and do, these are all priced out with the associated FTE. Though the last time we presented that was, I believe, in November, some items have been removed. But the items that are on this list and on that list are priced accordingly with the corresponding FTE, if applicable, next to it. So I know you're going to do your homework, Jerry, and if you have any questions, you're going to reach out to me, right?
I did peruse the 148 pages. I did not read it carefully.
Thanks, Stephanie. So on the school side, on the municipal side, as you said, we've provided the breakdown, broken out into, as you said, 35 different lines. I mean, some of those lines are as small as, I have it here on my screen, as small as $5,000, right? So, for example, I just want to give it sounds like 35 things. I want to give people a sense of what's in here. Conservation, for example, Wedge Pond, Winter Pond, Mill Pond, Judkins Pond, and shoreline erosion and conservation area maintenance are 7 separate line items. So we sum that up as $99,000, but they're broken out here at the 6. There's one that's the Wedge Pond aeration system, which is $3,000. Some are very de minimis numbers. And so you're right, when you build it up for FY27, you get about 800, and when you build it up for FY29, you get about 1.4 million. So that's the range that they go to. The categories, largest categories are here. Another category that's in the model is WinCam, which is a organization that's presumably televising this, but certainly needs some operating support, growing a subsidy for them from 50,000 to 75 up to 100, then leveling it off. The rec subsidy, public works and general government are the largest two. So that's been published. We're happy to direct people toward it, though.
Carol's back.
Yes, Carol Savage. I'm a Precinct 5 town meeting member. And Jerry had the same question as you. After the last info session by TMMA, I asked for that breakout slide. Thank you for providing it, so we can see what is a fixed cost that will not be included in the operating override. This committee's done a great job communicating and answering questions. The other thing to clarify is my understanding is that this override's going to be 2 questions on the ballot because there'd be an operating override for, no? The capital is not, we'll have 2 parts, right? For the,
but there's a single vote.
One question,
vote.
2 parts.
Okay, so one yes vote, okay. So I want to express my strong support for the work of this committee and for an override that's in the amount that will fund the investment in the initiatives by the school department, which I understand to be about the $12.5 million amount. And I just want to thank everyone on the town committees, the volunteers, and the town staff who carried out this state of the town process. I understand that there are those who would prefer a smaller number. No one ever likes to see a tax increase. I respect the instinct to keep it small. And we should all want to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. But I feel that we are being good stewards. We have what we have been looking for a long time, a multi-year plan with details. It's got a model, and it ties to assumptions, specific assumptions. So that's what gives me confidence in this proposal. It's a 3 to 4 year plan. Who knows what a $10 million plan would fund and how long it would last. So, I don't want to be arbitrary about the number. This number has specific assumptions tied to it. This work of this committee was substantial. They identified meaningful cost savings in the school and town department, cost savings, substantial ones. They set realistic growth targets. They negotiated and signed a teacher's contract that aligned with those assumptions. These are smaller numbers than we've seen in a while, and thank you to the teachers union that worked with them on that. They prepared detailed projections of the tax impact, and including the Morocco renovation, which is really wonderful. It factored in relief for cost-burdened families, which was a priority for this committee. I know they talked a lot about that. So I know there is a sensitivity in this plan to that. We heard that tonight.
So, Carol, you have about another minute.
Okay. I have 1 minute. Okay, so this level of analysis
reflects countless volunteer hours. If we'd had to pay for this, it would have been expensive. We're fortunate to have it. It's a plan we should take seriously. I fully support the Tier 2 investments. That's to help the struggling students that need the extra support. We know we need investment in our literacy and math. I am an empty nester. My kids went through the school system. I know this could have been even helpful then. I'm also very excited by the expansion of adult education opportunities that through the rec department that will address gaps in services and get more of us into our school buildings. So for these reasons, I support the $12.5 million override. I appreciate this. If anything, I think we should be investing in more staff to help us do data analysis. The central office of the schools has done this on a shoestring, and I think we need to give our town hall and school staff the resources they need to deliver on the very high expectations we've always had as a community. So thank you for your work as a community. We need to come together on this number, and I know that may mean some of us digging deep, but I fully support that. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, Sean.
Hi, my name's Sean Macanuco. I live at 42 Brookside Ave. My children are, I have 3 kids. I raised them. They're independent. And they went through different schools, Lynch, Morocco. Always thought I was getting that new Morocco, but now he's 22. So anyway, I was very passionate back then about having all the things for my kids, and even though they're grown up and out, I feel the same passion that I'm hearing from the parents here in the room with little ones, and I am also very passionate about things like WinCam being seen on the budget line, and I appreciate that you have that as a line item. WinCam is always doing these things, and we need your support. So I fully endorse a robust override. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Roger?
Roger Wilson, Precinct 1. I'm a town meeting member. I've also been a member of the Finance Committee, the Capital Committee, and the Personnel Committee. I would encourage you to pick the lowest possible number for the size of the override. I think it's a good financial discipline, and I think it's a bad idea to play chicken with the voter, particularly the voters who don't show up at these meetings and don't necessarily understand that we have to have an override. Which we do. We have to have an override to avoid dramatic changes in our spending. But we talk about a structural deficit. Well, what's the structure that causes the deficit? It's the structure of our costs, our expenses. We can raise revenue at will. All we have to do is tax ourselves more, and that is really not a structural problem. We have a structure to address the revenue side. What we don't have is a structure to address the cost side. It's a great step in the right direction to get the school committee to focus on 4.25% or whatever it was. I think that's terrific, and that's the kind of thing we need to be doing more of, with a long-term plan that has periodic, relatively modest overrides. The 12.5 is going to cause that, in combination with the other increases that have already been put in motion, is a 10% increase in taxes from 26 to 27. That's not chump change. That's significant. And people's incomes are not going up at 10%. And eventually, if we keep up that rate of growth, we're going to hit a wall when the voters say no. And then what are we going to do? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Laura.
Mara Sullivan, Precinct 1. I want to say thank you to the state of the town because I think that is representative of tremendous financial discipline. I've watched all the meetings, Stephanie, I've done my homework already, and I'm confident that the range that the select board has put forward is reasonable and is probably the lowest we can do. And we're not going to be alone. Melrose just passed $13.5 million, and as Nora said, Arlington passed a $7 million one in 2023, and now they're coming back looking for a range of 15 to 18.8 million. So I think, I applaud this group, and as everyone's been calling it a robust override, I also support a robust override. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi, Hillary Eaton, Precinct 1 town meeting member. So I've got a comment and a question. Maybe I'll start with the question. So there was a previous comment made around making all the slides tonight available, and definitely supportive of that. There was a cutely named slide around let's not supersize the override that had a comment about whether we pass a 1 million or 100 million override, we will be reducing staff and teachers in the schools. These are planned reductions by the schools, not driven by structural deficits. My question for the school committee is, are the staffing changes in a 1 million or a, let's say, 15 million override different?
I just like throwing the new girl at these things. So between a 1 million override and a $15 million override.
Yeah, just reducing the hypothetical 100 million to the 15 million that we have on that table.
I don't know exactly the threshold that we would have to cross in order to not meet the asks that the schools have put forward. It's definitely not 1 million. Oh, yes.
7.8.
Is it this one?
Sorry for making people do math live.
Sorry, Hillary. Thank you. Hillary, thank you for your question. You can go over the override scenario in a moment, but there's 5.5 of free cash needed to balance next year's budget. We have talked with FinCom, school committee, and select board to say we'd use 3 to 4, and that's what this is. You're showing the difference of 3 to 4. But 5.5 is what you need to actually plug the deficit. Right now, maybe it's 5, but it's 5 to 5.5 is sort of our view. In addition, the school's strategic additions for year 1 are 2.3 million. So you add those together and you get a number somewhere between 7.3 and say 7.8 million. They would also have one-time asks of 800, but that would be obviously one time.
So it's that bullet on the right that talks about the difference being 12 to 16 mentioned earlier, and then 12 to 15 additional?
Sorry, repeat the question.
The question on staffing specifically. So that bullet on the right, second one down, this is reduction across all classifications of an incremental 12 to 15 FTEs.
So this is, let me just be clear. So right now, and this point was made earlier, we are already anticipating, because of enrollment changes, downward enrollment changes, that there will be a reduction in FTEs from this school year to next school year. Part of the reason why we were able to get to the 5% year-over-year growth target from the 6.8, I believe it was, that was in the original level services budget, was because of the fact that we know that we are going to have to make reductions to sections based on a lower level of enrollment that's predicted. Now, of course, that could always change, but it's, as of, the town does a census, so we know roughly the number of students who are going to be coming into kindergarten in the fall. We know what's going to be moving through next year. So the school committee has already discussed extensively and agreed that we will be able to make those section reductions to get to the 5.0% year-over-year level services budget that's presented. Now, if the override does not pass, and we then have to use the $4 million free cash number that was set as a guideline for us to present a budget scenario by select board when they met last week, was it? This would require us to do an additional 12 to 15 FTEs in reductions. And we're not alone. I think part of what a lot of folks understand from sort of, having friends in other communities and seeing news reports is,
the reality is that many communities are facing the same decisions that we are. Boston University's Wheelock Institute recently put together a study where they looked at enrollment patterns in K-12 schools in Massachusetts, and one of the things they actually noticed was that particularly in higher SES communities, there was actually an even greater number of students sort of falling off. But in general, across the Commonwealth, regardless of SES, we're just seeing lower levels of enrollment. Now, there's lots of reasons for that, but it doesn't preclude the fact that we're also dealing with a more complex student population, higher levels of need for intervention, higher levels for IEPs and specific services, which all come with legally mandated costs. And so, when we talk about making a reduction of 12 to 16 in the level services budget and then adding another 12 to 15 on top of that, the reason why we say that we're at risk of noncompliance, I would say primarily with our legal obligations, is because it is going to become very hard for us to provide legally mandated services in some cases and still maintain the model that we have. I hope that answers your question, but it's a tough scenario, right, to sort of think about, even if we use some free cash this year. I think earlier Paris and Michelle said, and I think Derek as well as Chair FinCom said, as time goes on, right, it becomes harder to actually sustain that. So we can maybe manage that for a year, but beyond that, it becomes really challenging.
Thank you, Stephanie and Tim. I appreciate the answer. So on to maybe the comment portion then. Again, maybe broken record, but echoing some of the previous commenters, my husband and I are transplants here. We moved about 6 months into pandemic because we had 2 toddlers and no backyard in Somerville and really needed some space for the toddlers to range. Why did we choose Winchester and not any of the local communities that surround us? Because of the schools. Because we heard amazing things about the community and the schools. Right? And so it's been kind of a shock to us over the past few years to understand that these schools that we have moved into don't provide literacy services that exist in many of the other states, including, according to a recent New York Times article this morning, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. I do really care about not pricing people out of Winchester. That was a really valid comment made earlier today. I also don't see anybody commenting on the Facebook page about, oh no, my house sold for a rising value. That's too bad, right? Everybody loves the rising house values here. That's good. That's part of what you kind of invest in this town for. And I hate to think that sort of in our bid for sort of fiscal conservatism, we're going to ignore people who move in specifically for schools and stop people from wanting to move here because they see more Boston Globe articles about us not devoting sort of just level services money to our schools. So I am strongly in support of a robust override. And thank you so much to the State of the Town Committee for doing all of this unpaid work. We really appreciate it. We'll do our homework. We'll read the entire report. Thanks.
Thanks. So one comment I want to make, which I think it was asked during I think maybe the start of this public hearing question, but certainly asked at the Q&A during town meeting. No one is suggesting no override at the select board, and $10 million gets you 3 years and a stretch into 4 years with additions. I want to say that point. Melrose has come up as a town with tiered questions, had a larger override after failing an override. I think that is relevant. And Arlington has 44,000 people. So overrides of different sizes in communities that are nearly twice our size have different impacts. All data points, all valid, but I think some context might be useful. I think, John, you're next, and then David.
Yeah. Hey, John Belair. I live at 136 Highland Ave, and I want to start with gratitude for the State of the Town Committee and all of their work throughout the summer, this fall, into the new year, bringing people together, working collaboratively, and leaving no stone unturned. And I think, to Ms. Pryor's point just a moment ago, when we think about peer communities, one that's near and dear to my heart is Lexington, where my mom is a public school teacher. And instead of engaging in a really thorough process, as we have here in Winchester, after passing a $660 million debt exclusion this fall, the select board in Lexington said, we're not even going to think about doing an override. And my mom received a letter from her superintendent last Friday letting her know that there are going to be some pretty serious workforce reductions in their town, and that they're going to be feeling the impacts of that. So I want to start with gratitude for our leadership here that has undertaken this process, and I appreciate the select board's commitment to moving forward with an override to help us support our students, support town workers and the community overall. And related to that, I think, seeing students in our classrooms today and knowing that the supports that they need still aren't there. Since 2019, the percentage of students who are not meeting grade level expectations in English language arts has more than doubled in pretty much every grade level as measured by MCAS results. And additionally, there's still large disparities in our district. Like if you were to compare, so in 2024, if you were a fourth grade student at Ambrose, you were twice as likely to meet grade level expectations on English language arts than if you were a student at Morocco. Think about that. Twice as likely, just depending on which elementary school you go to. And these literacy investments and math curriculum investments that we're going to hopefully make with this override will go a long way in correcting those inequities and making sure that all of our students, regardless of their background, have the support that they need to develop into their best selves. During town meeting, Mr. Betancourt, I think, raised a really great point around inclusion and making sure that our town is accessible and open to people. And Ms. Pryor talked about some of the data we have around social services and how we're seeing poverty rates or claims related to social service applications or visiting ANCA. And I think that's really important for us to consider. But giving the town more revenue is exactly what we need to help meet those needs, in my opinion. And Mr. Bayani, I know, talked about during his presentation, and I have a question for him related to tax fairness and just the steps that we're taking as a town to make sure that our most vulnerable populations, our seniors, our students, our veterans are getting the support that they need and that they're not being overburdened by that. So if you could speak a little bit more to the steps we're taking to minimize the burden on folks who may not have as much of an ability to pay.
Thank you, John, for your question. We had a whole work stream devoted to this. It was work stream 5, which I led, taking a look at both the senior deductions, the senior circuit breaker, the tax deferral, the volunteer program, and the veterans expansion under the HERO Act. And I think we brought probably more expansions to these programs forward in 2025 than had been done in probably since their creation decades ago. The other piece is the residential tax exemption. So this creates a certain percent of the levy that is not taxed for every home. So let me just give you an example. Say you set it, the CPA is a good example. The CPA is set at $100,000, which is roughly 7%. And the select board talked about a range of 5 to 10%. So let's say you have a $700,000 home. You pay taxes on $600,000 of that. So you pay taxes on 84% roughly, 84% of your home in that case. Say you have a $3.5 million home, right? One that's worth 5 times as much. In that case, you're only paying tax, you only have 3% exempt from it. So what it does is it creates a little bit of a graduated system so homes that are below a certain value, which is the average value, get a little bit of a break. And so Concord implemented this on top of a middle school exclusion to defray the impact of that exclusion on seniors, those who live in lower valued homes, those on fixed incomes. And that was the concept we brought forward, which is, do we pair the two of them together? On the distributional equity point, just to pick up a bit on that, I think that's embedded very deeply in the school committee's asks, that we do see a lot of Russian School of Math, we do see a lot of Orton Gillingham tutoring that costs people a lot, and then there's a whole subset of our families and students that can't pay for it. To Carol Savage's question earlier, WinRec programs are much cheaper than private sector alternatives. Council on Aging programs are much cheaper than private sector alternatives. So that was very much embedded in the thinking of revenues that can be used to create programs that actually save people money, or that they couldn't access services otherwise, was part of the thinking. After all, to Ms. Pryor's slide about SNAP and food stamps, which we've talked about, that is itself a public program that's financed through general taxes.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask if anybody wants to get in line now. I'm going to shut off the line in about 5 minutes. So if anybody is calling their friends or anybody's telling people to show up, I'm going to say whoever's in line by 9:20, we're going to hear, and whoever's not, we're going to be done. So, I mean, if it's been an hour since we started, if people need to get here, I think that's a reasonable expectation. Mr. Miller.
Hi, David Miller, Precinct 5, recently retired chair from the CPA Committee, Conservation Committee, and the Winchester Tree Committee. And without any defensiveness, I'd like to change the subject to trees.
You have 3 minutes.
What's that?
You have 3 minutes.
Okay. All right, I can do it. First of all, I'd like to applaud the Select Board for creating this category of strategic additions to the budget. It reflects, in my mind, perhaps I'm being generous, but I think it reflects, my understanding, stepping out of the huge buckets of schools and capital to look at what else this town needs from a strategic perspective to make it the town that has the quality of life that we'd all like to have. The other point I would like to make is in the charge that the Select Board gave to the State of the Town Committee, create a comprehensive financial plan, and I focus on the question of assessing the town's assets, and that's a jumping off point for me for trees, which I think we all inherently know the value of trees, but there's actually quantitative value to trees as well, putting them in the category of an asset, and that is the addition they make, focusing on one thing to our property values. It's a measurable number, it's a big number, it's actually perhaps more than many people think, but part of what creates the value in our homes, in our town, are our trees and the presence of our tree canopy. And we've measured quantitatively Winchester tree canopy, and it has gone down significantly over the last decade. As I speak right now, Winchester has never spent one budget dollar identified as such on trees. So the inclusion of this in the strategic budget is a very big thing to those of us who are in favor of this sort of activity. So I look to all to support this particular aspect of this. I would also say that without spending money, of course, we won't get any more trees, but the process of adding to our canopy is a structured, analytical, professional one, and so not simply spending money on trees is sufficient, but the idea of bringing a tree warden on is also critical to being successful in this. I would then close by saying, if you compare Winchester to all of our neighboring towns who spend extensively every year on trees, many of them have strategies of planting hundreds of trees per year. Each of them has a tree warden that supports that activity. So on the measure of whether we're doing this or not, we're not measuring up at all. The inclusion of it in the budget makes tremendous sense to me, and I think will be beneficial. There's actually a measurable ROI to our spending those dollars. So stop there.
Jeff,
Yep.
and then Ms. Olson.
Thank you. Jeff Calabrese, Town Meeting Member, Finance Committee Member, and I'm here to advocate strongly for a much lower override amount. I agree that the town needs an override, but not at these levels. And I'll make a simple point that we have enough money already. So a quick story. November 2024, we had a little over $20 million in free cash. Going into the FY26 budgeting cycle, we had a projected deficit of about $4.5 million, roughly about what's being projected here. We went through that process, we used free cash, and as we sit here today, we have more money in free cash. We can use free cash, and I would argue, interestingly, I would argue we should, because an increase in this tax levy will never go away. This will be permanent. So when we talk about making increases to taxes, this will be it. When we talk about children wanting to live here, the taxes will go up. Free cash, you have levers that you can pull to adjust and make adjustments, and we don't have those with an override at these amounts. So I advocate strongly for a much lower dollar amount. I encourage the Select Board. I think there's a lot of good work that's being done here, but I encourage the Select Board to really think about this on Thursday and what trajectory they're putting the town on, and whether the taxpayers will actually be for it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy?
Hi, I'm Tracy Olson, Precinct 1, and I'm chair of the Conservation Commission. And I'd like to echo what David said about us having significant assets that are not very well valued in the town. And I'd like to speak on, advocate for the conservation priorities as part of the municipal strategic additions that you saw Paris speak so eloquently on. The CONCOM's priorities are management of the town's 9 conservation areas and the beauty and ecological health of our waterways, including, most importantly, Mill Pond, Judkins Pond, Wedge Pond, Winter Pond, and the Aberjona River. We are so lucky to have these wonderful open spaces and natural environment in our town that deliver tangible value and intangible benefits to our residents. The beauty and usability of our ponds, rivers, parks, and conservation areas increase the desirability of our town, draw people to the downtown area, and provide recreational opportunities for residents. Maintenance and upkeep of these areas are currently underfunded or in some cases unfunded, and we rely heavily on dedicated volunteers and scouts assisted by the DPW. A small investment in the operating budget of these areas, as was shown on the slide, will return substantial benefits in their usability and enjoyment by residents and their ecological health, and will be a force multiplier on the efforts of volunteers and scouts to maintain and improve these spaces. The additional funds will enable us to do activities that can't be done by volunteers, such as managing invasive aquatic and land-based species, improving and beautifying shorelines with erosion controls and native species, increasing biodiversity, supporting pollinators, birds, and other wildlife, and improving the user experience in conservation areas with marked trails, benches, and bridges. I ask you to invest in the beautiful natural environment of Winchester by supporting the conservation priorities as part of the strategic additions to the municipal operating budget. Thank you.
Okay, so the end of the line is Mr. Matthews and Ms. Trong. Okay.
And I'm at the front.
Ms. Von Mary, yes, you are. You're at the mic.
I'm Heather Von Mary, 23 Loring Ave. I'm also a town meeting member representing Precinct 8. I'm kind of happy I'm talking now in the hearing versus in town meeting because I can talk a little bit more open. I obviously support the school's initiatives and their additions, but I really wanted to talk a little bit more openly to town meeting generally because when I look at the modeling that has been done, it is conservative. Which then you could go and say, okay, well, we could hold back this, what if this happens, what if that happens, we can get more money here, more there. But in the state of everything that we do, especially longtime town meeting members, we know that there is instability. There is instability right now all over the place, and we have to plan. And we did the best. I think that the state of the town did the best they could planning for what we can proceed, we can see out there might happen, and do the best we can. But here's the kicker. Whether it's 10 million or 13 million, whatever we get from the select board, funny enough, this is a comment I had from Michelle at their hearing, at their meeting last week with TMMA, is that what's really interesting is we are the ones. Town meeting is the one who holds the line. And we have gathered and we have planned and we have the strategic additions for the schools laid out. We have the strategic additions through fiscal year 30 for the town. Those are all laid out also in the master plan that I did in the planning board for through 2030. We have it all laid out, what we want to do. Now, if we find money, we do not raise the taxes because of it. We do it incrementally. So to put the money that we need to do fiscally conservative planning, and if we don't use it, town meeting, do not take that money. And FinCom, we need you to hold that line for us through fiscal year 30, and we also need the State of the Town Committee to keep going because we need to keep planning. What happened after our last override, we had 3 years planned out how we were going to use those funds, and then it fell apart, right? It turned into this push and pull between this strategic addition or this is needed and that's not needed, and it pinned all of FinCom and the town meeting against each other because we did not have a plan. Right now, we have a plan through fiscal year 30. So let's implement the plan. We'll put the money on for the conservative number, which actually is more. Conservative is actually more in this case, but how we spend it, we hold the line. And it's town meeting's job to do that, and that is what we need to do as a meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Going.
So PhDs or doctors or misters or, anyway, non-medical.
Sorry, Jared.
No,
Go
please,
right
Mr.
ahead.
Cumming, no PhD, not a medical, don't to be called doctors. Okay, very good. So I am really gracious, full of gratitude as well about the work that the State of the Town Committee did. Thank you for all of that. It was an enormous amount of work. I thought briefly about doing it, but I could see what it's going to be, and it was even more than that. And the product is spectacular. The thoughtfulness is great. I'm also really happy to see all the energy from young parents here about the quality of the school system. As you can probably tell from my rakish hairstyle and gray in my beard, I am not a young parent. I'm an old parent. But I'm a parent who has a 22-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I have seen how the education in this town has changed. Reading, writing, arithmetic, these are the things we teach in schools. Values are what we teach at home. One of the values we teach in our home is that we don't love you as a child of ours proportionate to how much money we spend on you. Right? Love and care is not proportional to the money spent. What matters is how you spend it, how you think about it, how you teach them. And so as a parent of both young and old children, I've seen the change. And I understand the energy. I understand wanting to spend more money to try and fix the problems of the education that have happened in this town. But it's not that we haven't spent money. Over the past 10 years, we've spent $750 million on school budget. The quality of the education that we've seen has gone down. The money has gone up. It is the school committee and the curriculum that is set, and that is where the line should be held. So that advocates for a smaller override now and come back. And let's see that the school committee holds to the promises they've made. There is new blood. There is turnover in the school committee. That's fantastic. But for those of you who didn't catch town meeting at the last session or watched on WinCam, the slide deck from the school committee had a speaker's note that said there's an overemphasis on academics in education. Listen to those words. There is an overemphasis on academics in education. That is the position in the speaker's notes of a current member of the school committee. It is not that we don't spend money. We should spend money. We should invest in our children, but we need to invest smartly. And we need, as town meeting members and as select board, please give us the tools to help guide the town and help guide school committee in the right direction for the benefit of our children and their education. I share the passion for what's been happening in the town. And the way to ensure that things get better is not to give a larger check. It's to give a check that requires coming back again in the not too distant future. So for the children, the right thing to do is to demand better curriculum. And the programs are there. That's great. Let's see that those promises are kept. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Lauren Taylor. I'm at 57 Bacon Street. I'm a parent of a kindergartner and a third grader. I'm also a school psychologist in a neighboring district, and I've seen changes in the education system over the last 20 years that I've been in education. And the thing that I've seen that's the difference between a good school and a great school is how much money that they provide per pupil. And I want to be in a community that has a robust educational system and that is able to spend a significant amount of money per pupil, because that is our future, and they're our future. They're the ones in 20 years from now, 30 years from now, they're going to be sitting in this room making all these decisions for us. So we want to make sure that we give them the skills and the tools to be able to do that. The school committee talked a lot about a tiered system. I firmly and strongly believe in that, and I also believe in PD for our teachers. This is a significant missing link in our current public school system. Our neighboring towns, as you saw from the presentation, are all doing this, and Winchester is not. Why can't Winchester strive for educational excellence for all students? We talked a lot about inclusive schools and vulnerable students. I appreciate the graphs that were put up there. But what have we done to support these students in our school system? Tiered support will allow schools to take actionable and measurable steps to ensure success for all students, not just the students that follow the normal trajectory or the special ed students. We need to support the students that are also in the middle. The Department of Ed has published a blueprint for a tiered system. I ask you, along with the other homework you've been given tonight, look at that blueprint. Look at your current public schools. Look at what we're not doing in those schools. I can guarantee you 90% of what's in that blueprint from the Department of Ed, Winchester Public Schools is not doing. I do believe with a robust override, we will be able to do these things. If our system fails to do this, the consequences should not fall on our students, but rather on all these individuals for allowing this failure to occur. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Amy Beliveau, Precinct 7. I am speaking in strong support of the robust override as proposed. You'll hear tonight and have heard tonight so many reasons why the override needs to happen, mostly focused on the schools. And everything that has said by all of those individuals is true. The override, a robust override, if voted in, will provide much needed improvements and changes to Winchester schools. But I also want to touch on the many other things that this override is going to be supporting townwide. If voted in, the override will provide much needed funds to preserve some of our town's most historic buildings and assets. Town Hall, Lincoln, Ambrose, McCall, our library. These restorations and repairs have been on our CPC's list for years, and the funds have just not been available. If we continue to put these projects off, they will become more urgent and more expensive to finance and fund. The override will also be providing funding to improve our town's sidewalks and infrastructure, implement a program to protect and improve the tree canopy and keep Winchester a climate leader, strengthen our town's cybersecurity, allow the town to maintain healthy reserves and protect our AAA bond rating, and provide necessary upgrades to public safety departments. Most likely, if somebody is in this room, it is because they care about our town in one way or another, and by voting in a robust override, the thing that got you to sit in this room will be addressed. It is not just about the schools, it is about our community. The schools are a huge part of that, but there is so much more we're getting with a robust override as well. And as a sitting at-large member of the State of the Town Committee, I can assure all of you that the due diligence necessary to ensure this override was as minimally impactful financially while being as maximally impactful in execution was done. The proposed override number asks for what those funds will support are not shots in the dark. They were built from thoughtful, collaborative, and bipartisan work. Waiting a year or pushing one committee to budget better will not solve the challenges we have at hand. I urge all of you to support the override in a robust way and to encourage your constituents in your precincts to support the override as well. And I also have a follow-up question. I was hoping that the State of the Town Committee can opine on how they were able to kind of consolidate with the school committee to get to that 4.25% number. Thank you.
Is that your last question, Amy?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Amy, and thank you for your service on the State of the Town Committee. One of the things that Winchester has talked about for years and that we've done here, and the question earlier from Jeff Calabrese about where it's been documented in the State of the Town report, is to actually agree on growth targets from the school's perspective as it relates to level services. The way that came about is ahead of the entire union negotiation cycle from the school committee with the Winchester Education Association. The select board met with the superintendent in executive session and then provided a letter to the school committee. 4 members of the select board signed it to the school committee saying that we would model the level services growth to be at 4% or less. They came in at 4.25, and we thought that was, a significant material improvement from what we've been seeing to date, and that's been published. And part of that is that first year, the 3 out years are 4, 4, and 4. That first year is at 5, and that is because they're coming out of the last contract cycle, and they still have the column movements, which are when people go get additional education, coming off of the last contract. So we thought on the years 2, 3, and 4, they're at the 4% that we asked for, and then that first year they're getting as close to it as possible by making some of the efficiencies that Stephanie and Tim talked about. But it was really the first time the select board has provided that type of guidance to the school committee, and the school committee, to their credit, and we really are happy that they did this, joined hands with us to agree on a set of numbers there.
Yes.
Michelle McCarthy, town meeting member, Oxford Street. I'm also a parent of Winchester students at the high school, and I'm the vice chair of the Historic Commission. I feel like my kids at Christmas, they want it all. I want literacy. I want our beautiful historic town center. I want parking so I can go to Lucia's. I want the best teachers. I want it all. But I meet a lot of people in town, and I know many of us are privileged and can afford this override, but I meet many who cannot. And I feel a responsibility as a town meeting member to think about some of those folks. Thank you, Michelle Pryor, for bringing up those numbers that I was not aware of with ENCA and food stamps. my question is to the school committee. Is there anything that we're doing to defray costs? Are we thinking about maybe selling Parkhurst or the Mystic School? What are we cutting? Our enrollment numbers at school are down. I just feel a responsibility before I vote for this override to think about the people who really can't afford it. And as I said, I want it all. I want to give it all to everybody, but I feel I feel there's some vulnerable members of our society who really cannot afford this override. So my question to school committee, is there anything that we're doing with maybe some of these buildings that can help offset the costs involved? Thank you so much. Appreciate all the hard work.
I'll answer that the Mystic School is now under the control of the Select Board, and the Select Board has not had that discussion about selling it. It's still the current office of our rec department and with a tenant with a multi-year lease. Yes, I'll let the school.
Assets, or are you asking generally about cost control on the school side?
So let's start with assets. So Paris and Michelle have already talked about Mystic School, which we no longer control. In terms of Parkhurst, we are at a point in terms of enrollment where we very much need to consider putting central office back into that building. Because currently central office is split between the high school and Lincoln School. And those two buildings are the buildings in which we actually have enrollment challenges. We definitely need the spaces that are in those buildings, in particular in the high school, and we've gotten the feedback that we need to be able to vacate the spaces that we're using in the high school in particular right now. So as far as Parkhurst is concerned, and it's certainly something that's on the committee's agenda to deal with, but in terms of doing anything with that right at this second, especially as we're facing those specific enrollment crunches in the places where we currently have offices, there's not much we're going to be able to do about that in the next year or two. Sort of more broadly speaking, I think the school committee has, we spent more or less the entire, so we spent more or less the entire summer meeting in workshops, we started with an exercise where we essentially looked at our mission and the goals that we're required to provide to the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. As an output of that process, we actually put together a vision memorializing what we heard from the community through the community engagement pieces that we did over the past year and a half. And then basically aligned the work that we were doing to those specific vision elements. What I would say is there's a willingness on the part of this committee to do really hard work. And we're starting to do that hard work in ways that may not necessarily be that easy to explain in a very tight 10 to 15 minute budget presentation at a special town meeting, right? So for those of you that have not, I know you've probably heard this 100 times already tonight, please go and watch the entire series of meetings that happened between the Select Board and the school committee, and also read all of the materials that are in the State of the Town box. That's a app, box.com, which I believe is lots of materials that are open to everybody. But in terms of, is the school committee making those hard decisions already? Yes. Enrollment numbers and how we allocate students to schools is one of the things we're already doing. And that's an incredibly challenging conversation because it turns out that children are not widgets, right? We can't force them to live in specific neighborhoods necessarily. And so, if we have situations where we have to make some hard choices, I'll use one, very salient example from my neighborhood. Morocco School had to have a 5th grade section reduced right before the beginning of the school year, and that was really hard for that community because those were COVID kindergartners and they'd become accustomed to having a little bit of extra support in classes of 13 or 14 students. That was not something we were able to continue for this year, and so we have students that are at the upper bound of our class size. That's one of 100 different little decisions we have to make along the way. And most of those decisions are made by the superintendent's office and Mr. Marin, who oversees finance and administration. But we're not unwilling to take on these things. I will be honest and tell you, got a number of really angry parent complaints, and I understand that, but it was something we had to do given the enrollment situation. I don't know if that answers your question, but there are lots of things that we're considering. Obviously, if you go back and look through some of the State of the Town materials, you can see some of the different range of possibilities that have been considered. But
So just as a follow-up, it sounds like you're thinking about everything, thank you, but you're not able to give up some of those assets yet because you need them right now.
Well, specifically the assets, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really just Parkhurst because we've done Mystic already. That's over to the town, and that's solely for the rec department at this point.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes.
I'm Rocio Friedman from 19 Hillside Avenue. I'm a mother of a kindergartner too. And like many of us, I moved to this neighborhood because of the schools. And like many of us, I was disappointed to learn that the schools were not what we thought they were going to be. And because of that, I'm here to say that I totally support a robust override. I think that what makes a good neighborhood desirable is the good schools. So if we don't have strong schools, we're not going to attract families to move to Winchester. And what's going to happen is people who can afford will go to private schools or will supplement like most of us do. And people who cannot are going to stay in the school system that is going to fail them. And I don't think that's fair for all of us. I don't think it's fair for kids who live in less favored households. And I think that if we support our schools, it's going to be for the well-being of all of us, of all our kids and our education. So I just want to say out loud that please vote for the override. Thank you.
Thank you.
Megan Blackwell, Precinct 7. Thank you to the State of the Town Committee for its hard work and all the presentations, the detailed presentations and the multiple opportunities to dial in and to engage. Thank you, Paris, for your presentation. I was specifically thinking about the Morocco School and the Morocco override, which, if I remember from your slide and your comments, that's targeting an override Q4 of 2028. So about...
Yes, a debt exclusion.
Thank you.
Yes.
And that's about 2.5 years from when the planned override vote will occur in March. And so I'm wondering if that's been part of the conversation at the Select Board when sizing the current override, because you might put the Morocco override at jeopardy, and you don't want them working against each other. I'm thinking of history of overrides in the town. If they're too closely spaced or one's too large, they fail. So has that been a consideration?
Yes, it has. Do you want to
Thank
say
you.
more?
The short answer is yes. I could just add to that. I think that was why there's a view that it needs to last sort of 3 to 4 years if we're asking people to vote. Our best guess from Chris Nixon, who I think may have left, is December, November, October, something in 2028, fourth quarter. Then you don't want the next override to occur in March of 2029. So that is the discussion of why we came to 3 to 4 years. And then from a tax impact perspective, we've put it in because it's the largest outstanding project. We've redone 6 out of 7 schools. That's the 7th and remaining school we would anticipate to have a large exclusion for.
And just quick follow-up, how about the size of the override? Because I can see 10 million, a lower size override, being more compatible to that Morocco passing, and a larger, robust override, 15 million, maybe putting it at jeopardy.
I think that's part of our discussion on Thursday. The Select Board is unanimous that we want an override and we want it to pass. Do we think this is the number that puts that other one at jeopardy? I don't know that we've had that robust debate. Word of the day, it's like Sesame Street, right? The number 12, 15 million and the word robust. But it's a fair point, Megan, but I would say the Select Board has not necessarily said this lever causes that thing to be at risk, but we are looking at the timing, to Paris's point, going beyond 2029, and I think that'll be our discussion on Thursday.
Thank you.
Sure. George? Getting to the end.
George Nowell Jr., 67 Nelson Street. Not to be redundant, just a for clarity, on the spectrum of overrides specifically, the difference between 10 million and the 15 million, they're funding basically the same things, just for shorter periods of time. The 10 million gets you to 3 years, and the 15 million gets you a little closer to 4.
Definitely gets you to 4.
Yes, it definitely gets you to 4. I think
Definitely.
10 on operating gets you, the 10 on operating as to capital gets you 3 and a bit more.
So for 10, you're funding the same things for shorter periods of time.
Yes.
10 of operating.
And you know, I know the whole spectrum, 10 million, 11 million, 12 million. They're all. I know you guys all probably, you know, there's a majority and there's a minority. It's all pretty bold leadership. You're showing a lot of courage to ask voters to, you know, whether it's, you know, people like us, whether we're going to spend an extra 800 initially, or 1,100 or 1,400. I think it's all pretty bold. So thank you guys for all your work.
Thanks, George. Milan, and then Lance.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of work that was. I'm sorry, Milan Chong, Precinct 4, town meeting member, and also finance committee member. It's my opinion. And I thank everyone for working on the state of the town. I know it's a lot of work. I have a question and also a comment after. When you're talking about Tier 2, how many students are you talking about, or percentage? Do you have that information?
So of the 3 tiers, there's Tier 1, students that meet the standard without any additional support. Tier 3 have an identified learning disability, they're on special education, they have an IEP. So Tier 2 is the largest of those 3, but to be fair, right now, whatever estimates we have, we don't have the progress monitoring tools and the ways to differentiate to really target those students. And also to put them on those services. So we have about, I'm sorry, Anthony, you said it was like 500? Yeah, it's like about 504. So 15% of elementary, but even still, I would say that that is an underestimate, because a lot of the tiered investments that we're hoping to make for tiered supports are for differentiation and also for that progress monitoring to see who qualifies for those services.
Can you say that to the microphone?
Yeah.
That's helpful.
So Tier 1, general ed. Tier 2, intervention. 3, special education. Yeah.
Okay. In Tier 3, I believe it's usually like 18 or 20%, right? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So round numbers, 15 to 20?
Milan, so I guess what's the...
I'm trying to understand, because part of the budget here, the ask is for Tier 2. I'm trying to understand what percentage of the students is Tier 2. It sounds like around 15%.
Right now, so what I will say is, you know, there's what we're talking about, what you're hearing from folks is, in general, when you look at school systems, that's approximately what you would see. I would say that one of the challenges that Winchester has had is that, you know, at least as I understand it, and this is being from someone who has enough knowledge from outside of Winchester to be dangerous and not really specific knowledge of the exact number of students who are receiving services in the classroom outside of IEPs, right? So we I think, have a really clear handle on the number of IEPs that we have in the district, obviously, because we're legally required to provide services. Where I think Winchester has always had a little bit of a challenge is in understanding how to provide appropriately differentiated instruction for students that are somewhere between Tier 1 and Tier 2, somewhere along that spectrum. So for those of you that don't know, this is all, it goes back to, you know, when I was in grad school 15 years ago, it was called response to intervention. We now call it multi-tiered systems of support. But the idea is if a student in the classroom struggles, whether that's with literacy or with math, they should be provided the appropriate differentiation of instruction, so they get either pull-out services or push-in services, or their teacher actually tries to provide services in the context of that classroom environment that addresses whatever gap in their learning that they're facing at the time. I would say that based on what I've learned about Winchester, we've historically always had a real focus on the teacher in the classroom providing the service and the differentiation as much as possible. Now, we've been lucky through the support of town meeting over time to have gotten more folks who can actually provide differentiation of instruction, starting with some literacy specialists, and now obviously through the funding that was approved at Springtown meeting, the 0.5 math interventionists that are in each of our 5 elementary schools. And obviously there are supports that come through the special education department. There's all sorts of different places where different types of learning and enrichment and engagement can happen. But at any time, obviously we can talk about what theory and research would say about how many students ought to be in those levels. I would say that based on what we're doing right now, we're finally actually getting to the point in Winchester where we have folks to differentiate from outside the classroom teacher in both literacy and in math in the elementary setting for the first time. And that is actually giving us the ability to know better who the students are. Now, the whole theory behind this is if you address a student's particular gap in learning at a specific time, it may actually be able to put them back into Tier 1, which is the broad classroom-wide instruction. And not send them on to Tier 3, which is where they get onto an IEP and need specific supports that are then funded through our budget, right? So the idea is if we actually address students earlier on when they're struggling for the first time and hopefully close those gaps, we are then able to hopefully prevent them from moving on to needing higher levels of services. So that's sort of RTI in a nutshell. I could talk about this for hours, but I hope that answers the question.
I think I had 30 seconds and then okay, if I can just,
you have a comment, right? That was your question. You said you have one question.
I was just like, if I can have the other 2.5 minutes. Actually I believe it is important, and actually the pandemic has actually made the group probably a whole lot bigger, and some of them dropped into Tier 3. I asked because I was trying to understand that in separation for the curriculum changes, having kids in the school system for almost 10 years. I'm actually, my youngest is a 7th grader. This is my 3rd kid through the 7th grade. I've seen changes to the curriculum, a bit concerned for the younger parents as to what those changes may be, whether decisions are being made to try and get this group. A lot of that, I believe personally, is pandemic related, to get them what they need versus changing the entire curriculum just to fix this group. And I already know that the high school is already talking about leveling mathematics to fewer possibilities, and I hope that's not the case. But overall, I just wanted to add the comment that and I'm highly supportive, right? I have 2 kids already through high school and 2 kids still in. Very highly supportive. But what are we teaching our kids? I just want to remind everyone, an override means taxes, and taxes means dollars out of people's pockets, and we need to make sure that whatever we do, that is the lowest ask that we are doing. And it's a good way in terms of our students to teach them, look, you just can't ask for everything you want. And I want to finish with telling people, I don't know if you know, Winchester currently is in the top 10 in the highest average property taxes. If you look in the mass.gov website, we're number 10. I love Winchester. I think Winchester's the #1 town, but do we really want to put Winchester way up? And are we going for #1 in the highest tax, average property tax in Massachusetts? Thank you.
Lance Grensback. A number of people have asked for a comparison of where we are today as to where we were in 2019. And the short answer is today we're in a much better position. I think Derek was correct. We have money in the bank. We have time. We're not at the edge of the cliff. And we could resort to the basic tactic that most towns and town meetings have adopted, which is to muddle through. Lowball the amount, put it off the decision until next town meeting, or put it off to another year, wait it out, and pray regularly that somehow revenues or expenses will drop, revenues will rise. And that's good. We have time to do that now. However, that was not the case in 2019. There were no reserves. We were at the edge of the cliff. Like the old Roadrunner cartoons, we were fine as long as we didn't look down. That was a very ugly situation, and you do not want to get there. You won't see it in the town meetings, but what you got was quiet calls from the Massachusetts State Building Authority saying, you guys are in line for a new school or two, but it doesn't look like you have your act together. It doesn't look like you're going to be able to raise the bond money. How about if we drop you to the end of the line because the competition is huge for schools? You got a call a visit from your police chief who says, we're one layoff away from losing national certification and watching everybody's interest rates on their insurance go up. Something like that. It rolls on and on. You get quiet calls from Moody's and S&P. They run the numbers through their spreadsheet, then they take out their Ouija board and say, what do we feel about this group? They call you quietly and they say, like the state, it looks like you guys can't get your act together. We might lower your rating. And you sit down and you say, how much would that cost the next bond? The answer is more than this override is worth, things like that. So I think before we rush in to sort of say, let's lowball and wait till it's absolutely at the edge of the cliff, let's take advantage of this period of time. We've done the work. Take a close look at the issues, take a close look at the amounts, and make sure we do it right. Because waiting until you're at the cliff, which we were in 2019, it does focus your attention, and it does get out the votes. But believe me, it's an ugly, ugly position. And if things go wrong, if you have another COVID epidemic, or you lose all your state and federal funding, things go south in a real hurry. People don't want to come and apply for jobs in your town, and the good people leave. So be very careful about wanting to just muddle through, because it may not get you to a better place than you are today. You've got the time now to think this through and make it work effectively. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. All right, Dr. Matthews gets to bring us home. And before you go, apparently BC is up 4-1 on the bean pot. For any three of you who care, go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
You can call me Bob. It's okay. So I'm Tim Matthews, 23 Kenman Road, Precinct 1 Town Meeting member, and I am definitely not speaking in my personal capacity as a member of the school committee now. I just wanted to say, in summary, as I did during our presentation, that I'm excited and hopeful at the end of this meeting. I know it's late and we're all sort of probably feeling the weight of that, but what's nice about what I've heard here tonight is that broadly it seems like everyone in this room agrees that we do have a path to solve the financial challenges that our town is facing. I will tell you, as someone who moved into this town, I grew up in Canada, I lived in upstate New York and then came to Massachusetts, where I've now been for 25 years. I moved into this town not really knowing a lot about it. What I've found since I joined town meeting and became involved in government is a town that is uniquely well positioned to actually take the proactive actions necessary to not make radical change, but to really make incremental positive change over time. And I hope that through this override, we are all able to come together around a number that definitely allows us to address the financial challenges that we have. It is meaningful that among our peer communities that we committed to compare during the State of the Town process, it is meaningful that Winchester has the second lowest per pupil expenditure in that selection set of other towns. A lot of folks have talked about sort of money as, something that's finite, and we have to teach our children good lessons about how not to spend, but we also need to teach our children lessons about when it is not good to be penny wise and pound foolish. And the request that the schools have made during the WPS 30 plan development has solely been to move us up roughly $1,000 per pupil in our expenditure, which puts us broadly in line with our friends next door in Belmont and Arlington. That is meaningful in that it allows us to put in place some of the fundamental supports that have been lacking and became very noticeable after what economists would call the exogenous shock of COVID. it really laid bare some of the places in which we had deficiencies in what we were able to deliver because of funding, not because we don't have committed high-quality educators, not because those educators are not compensated fairly, but because of the fact that they did not have the curricular and professional development resources necessary to do their job. And that $1,000 delta was the difference. And so I'm grateful to all of my colleagues on the state of the town. It's been a long road. Thank you all for sticking with it. Thank you for building a sense of collegiality. And now let's go out and do this in some kind of way that's meaningful for the families and students of Winchester. Thanks and good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. So the last plug, and thank you, Paris, for reminding me that it's there. Shout out to the high school choir. They'll be at Carnegie Hall in April. There's a QR code to donate. It's huge for them. And with that, we're going to adjourn our public hearing. Have a good night. I'll see some of my colleagues on Thursday. Thank you. Oh, I almost left my phone. I'm like, I just keep timing. Oh, I kept timing people.